Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Bellevue City Council special meeting for October 29th, 2024. It's my son's 30th birthday, so that's exciting. It's only special tonight because it's not typical that we have a meeting on the last Tuesday of the month, and so it's not like special material, it's just a special date. Before we begin, I want to say a few words about attending and participating in council meetings. Individuals are not allowed to disrupt the meeting. This includes talking out of turn or without permission, interrupting or making sounds when somebody else is talking, or approaching council members or city employees who are staffing the meeting. If a person disrupts this meeting, I will give a warning, end the person's remaining comment time, or ask the person to leave the meeting room for the rest of the meeting. My hope and my personal request is that we can express ourselves without name-calling, taunting, or disparaging others, and I know that we can do it, so let's start the meeting. City Clerk, could we do roll call, please?
Thank you. Mayor Robinson?
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Malakutian?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Neuenhouse?
Here.
Councilmember Stokes?
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn?
Councilmember Stokes, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a Veterans Day proclamation that's going to be read by Councilmember Zahn and received by my friend Rafael Munoz Citron from the National Executive City Committee and the American Legion Department of Washington. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would be honored to. Whereas November 11th is Veterans Day, a time to pay tribute to the people who have served or currently serve our country in military service. And whereas Bellevue residents celebrate the sacrifices made by our military and veterans at a grove of trees and memorial at Downtown Park, placed there in 1926 and enhanced in 2015. And whereas the contributions of the men and women in the Navy, Army, Air Force, Marines, Space Force, and Coast Guard in support of our national security is immeasurable. And whereas the freedom we enjoy in this country, we owe in great part to the valor of our veterans in conflicts around the world. And whereas behind every person in uniform, there are families, caregivers, and loved ones who compensate and sacrifice for the person serving. And whereas Veterans Day takes place on the anniversary of the end of World War I, and now therefore I, Janice Zahn, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of its City Council, do hereby proclaim Monday, November 11th as Veterans Day in Bellevue and urge all residents to reflect on the contributions and sacrifices of the people who have served in the U.S. Armed Forces.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson, distinguished members of the Bellevue City Council, especially Janice. Call her Janice. She's a frequent flyer in our post. She supports many of our activities and is a close personal friend of several of our members of the post and the auxiliary too. Most Americans profess to truly love our veterans, especially at gatherings like this on Veterans Day and Memorial Day. And while their feelings are sincere, it is important to remember that veterans are defending us in the United States 365 days a year. The heroism that has been demonstrated time and time again by veterans from the American Revolution to the global war on terrorism is sometimes unnoticed by many who enjoy the security that their sacrifice has provided. Not all veterans have seen combat, but all at one time made the solemn promise to sacrifice their lives for this country if called upon. With our formidable strength that veterans have demonstrated in wars, Americans will never enjoy their daily freedoms. I have a plaque in my office that said, "What is a veteran?" A veteran is someone who at one point in their lives made out a check, paid out to the United States of America, made out to up to their lives. That's something that we should think about every day. It was none other than George Washington who said, quote, "To be prepared for war is one of the most effective means of preserving the peace," unquote. For many veterans, our nation was important enough to endure long separations from our families, miss the birth of their children, freeze in sub-zero temperatures, roast in faraway deserts, lose limbs, and far too often lose their lives. Their families serve and sacrifice as well. Military spouses had to endure career interruptions, frequent changes of addresses, and disproportionate share of parental responsibilities. The children often had to deal with changes in schools, separations from friends, and the hardest of all, the uncertainty of whether or not mom or dad will live through the next combat tour. Warriors need advocates, and that's why the American Legion exists. We are here to serve veterans, their families, and our communities. Veterans need each other, but more importantly, our country needs our veterans. You cannot fight a war without veterans, and while the utopian idea of a society without war is appealing, let us not forget that wars have liberated slaves, stopped genocide, and toppled terrorists. Stephen Ambrose once wrote, "America's wars have been like rungs on a ladder by which it rose to greatness. No other country has triumphed so long, so consistently, or such a vast scale through the force of arms," end quote. It has often been said that without our veterans, Americans would be speaking Russian, German, or perhaps Japanese. Regardless of which view of alternative history you take, we do know that our veterans, America would not be America. Our debt to these heroes can never be repaid, but our gratitude must be last forever. Thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me, and may God bless America.
Thank you. Let's take a picture together. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next we have oral communications. City Clerk, do we have anyone signed up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This evening, there are 6 pre-registered speakers on our list. So before I start calling names, I'll go over a few of the rules that the council has in place for oral communications. So the time period is for no more than 30 minutes, and all topics must relate to City of Bellevue government. People speaking to items on tonight's agenda will be called first, and then if time remains, people speaking to items not on tonight's agenda will be called. In both of those categories, the presiding officer is authorized to give preference to people who have not spoken to council within the last 60 days or who will be speaking to items anticipated to come on the calendar within the next 60 days. Speakers are each allowed up to 3 minutes to speak, and a maximum of 3 speakers are allowed to speak to any one side of a particular topic. And with that, I'll call our first speaker, who is here in person, and that is Matt Arnold.
council members, for the opportunity to speak for a second about this important issue. My name is Matt Arnold, and I'm here tonight to show my support for Councilmember Neuenhouse's ordinance to bring back mandatory minimum sentences for repeat offenders for the crimes they commit. My family and I have been Bellevue residents for over 25 years, and over the last 4 years in particular, we have seen dramatic increase in our Lochleven neighborhood of vehicle prowling, home theft, etc. I have personally had 5 car prowls over a 3-year period, 2 on my wife's car and 3 on mine, and 2 of them are on complete full video coverage. My neighbor just down the street has had 3 incidents as well with his vehicles. We see various suspicious and often criminal incidences reported constantly on the Bellevue Nextdoor app about break-ins, car prowls, criminal trespasses, etc. On pretty much a daily basis. There are emails written, and it never seems to change or become less frequent. In addition, I have personally witnessed countless shoplifting at the Bellevue QFC, Bartels, pretty much whenever I decide to pay attention to it. It truly happens that often. They have to lock up everything of value in the store and create a big inconvenience for the tax-paying honest citizens of Bellevue just to shop for groceries and supplies, all because of the constant theft that is going on. I am surprised that they actually can make their businesses work given the current situation. If you really think about it, how possibly can you change a behavior if it goes unpunished? It makes no sense. In fact, by not punishing it, in my opinion, it's promoting the behavior. I would like to express my support for the proposal to conduct research and analysis of mandatory minimum sentences to repeat offenders convicted of multiple crimes within our community. I believe this would be a positive step forward in keeping Bellevue safe for its residents and businesses, and eventually getting Bellevue back to the city it was pre-pandemic. I appreciate your consideration and my input on this important ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chris Marks.
Good evening. I'm Chris Marks, and I have resided in Bellevue for over 30 years. And I appreciate this opportunity to add my comments tonight as a member of the People for Climate Action. As you enter these final stages of budget deliberation, I want to compliment the work of the Environmental Stewardship Initiative, which is your focus tonight. I want to recognize that in the 2 years since the last budget, ESI projects have evolved as staff with expertise has expanded. I see them working with climate youth groups and the school district. I see them expanding community understanding through town halls and newsletters. Nothing highlights the value of the ESI impact better than the work being accomplished through the Energy Smart Eastside program. The concept of replacing 1,200 gas furnaces that wear out each year in Bellevue with heat pumps via the ESE program is brilliant. The project design upends inequities in housing, grows community education and climate awareness, lowers our shared greenhouse gas emissions, and raises our leadership profile because Bellevue hosts the staff that administers the program for the 6 Eastside cities who are utilizing it. Unfortunately, Bellevue's next biennium budget draft falls far short of funding this heralded program to a level where it could significantly contribute to the 95% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, the target in our new comprehensive plan update. It will take many years to replace our gas furnaces in Bellevue residences and small businesses, and yet this work is critical to reach any of our goals. And the path has been laid through Bellevue's ESI and the expansion of the Energy Smart Eastside program. Unfortunately, the proposed biennium budget seems to conclude that there isn't enough revenue in Bellevue to fully embrace the environmental stewardship work that we have shown ourselves capable of and that aligns with our stated goals and commitments. It baffles me that we would not find the budget to build on these burgeoning successes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alice Meng.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malkutian, other council members, City Manager Carlson, and other city staff. My name is Alice Meng, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Bellevue People for Climate Action Leadership Team as well. We'd like to take this opportunity to offer a few comments regarding the environmental stewardship update materials that we found in the agenda postings for tonight's council meeting. First, we saw from the chart showing citywide greenhouse gas emissions since 2011 that emissions dipped in 2020, but they were on the rise in 2021 and again in 2022. Second, we observed that the dominant emissions colors by far are orange and magenta. Orange represents transportation emissions and magenta represents, quote, energy emissions. A footnote points out that 93% of the energy emissions come from existing buildings. Third, the orange bar for transportation emissions shrank dramatically in 2020, no doubt caused by reduced mobility during the pandemic. However, by 2022, transportation emissions were again close to their pre-pandemic level. Please remember that PCA's budget request to increase crosstown bus service would help to cut such emissions and also have equity benefits. Fourth, in 2020, the magenta-colored emissions for existing buildings dropped significantly as well. However, research suggests that this was largely due to the electricity grid becoming cleaner when Puget Sound Energy closed its coal-fired power plants in Colstrip, Montana. While the existing buildings' emissions did not rebound in 2021 and 2022, they did not drop either. Our PCA request to boost funding to help single-family homeowners as well as owners of small multifamily and commercial buildings to cut emissions would significantly shrink the existing building emissions. Those programs would also improve equity and housing affordability. Finally, as we reviewed the agenda materials showing the 2020 Sustainability Plan Progress Update, we were reminded that none of the actions in that current plan, even once they are completed, would swiftly lower citywide greenhouse gas emissions in either the transportation or existing building sectors, while at the same time increase living affordability. So clearly, new, more impactful actions are needed to do that, such as those that People for Climate Action has proposed in its budget request. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Catherine De Stefano.
Hi, good evening. First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight and to share my support towards the mandatory minimum sentences for the public disorder crimes, including misdemeanor theft. I am a local business owner, and I've been in business at Bellevue Square for 24 years. We appreciate the continued efforts and the resources that have been put towards the ORT and look towards the possibility of the mandatory minimum sentences for public disorder crimes. Strong cities require both healthy communities and thriving commerce. Bellevue has grown and is home to many leading tech companies and the Bellevue Collection, along with many local small businesses. However, the backbone of our strong community are the residences and their support to small businesses. One of the growing issues we see our city face is repeat offenders of the theft to our local stores, residences, and property. These small malice crimes are hurting the people that live here and that support our local economy. We experience the theft at retail stores. In addition, we see evidence of theft on a daily basis when visiting our local grocery stores. Thieves freely walk out of storefronts with goods in hands. Many larger retailers are locking up products behind glass displays, and entire product aisles of our local Target are now under lock and key. The Bellevue residents and business owners need help to enforce stronger penalties for repeat criminals. Loss in our inventory, extra efforts in prevention, and the impact this has on business morale, and is also hurting our ability to operate. I would like to express my strong support for the proposal provided by Jared Newenhouse. For the proposal to conduct research and analysis and mandatory minimum sentences for repeat offenders convicted of multiple crimes in our community. I believe this is a positive step and shows the council's commitment to make Bellevue safe for its residents and businesses. I request your approval for this research and analysis initiative so that we can find the right solutions to the problem of increasing crime. Let's keep Bellevue safe and thriving. I appreciate your consideration of my input. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Angela Fan. Looks like Ms. Fan is joining us virtually. Ms. Fan, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. Your time begins now.
Good evening, council members and city staff. First, I want to thank each of you for your dedicated efforts to support our community and especially our youth. Your recent approval of one-time extra funding speaks volumes about your commitment to the organizations that are supporting young people across Bellevue. This additional support is a significant step in building a more resilient and inclusive city, so thank you. I do want to address a suggestion that the other third of the one-time additional funding prioritize rental support instead of organizations focused on serving specific populations like our people with disabilities in this community and those in need of culturally and linguistically specific services. While rental support is definitely a vital need, a shift away from targeted services does a disservice to the very diversity Bellevue values and stands for. Our city thrives because of its rich cultural tapestry, and many of our youth are direct recipients of these specialized services that are tailored to meet unique needs. Supporting culturally and linguistically specific organizations, as well as those addressing disabilities, creates a network of trust, access, and community building that cannot be easily replicated by general services alone. It allows youth and families from all backgrounds to engage meaningfully, ensuring that every member of our community feels seen, supported, and valued. Focusing narrowly on a few services limits our ability to address the complex needs of our residents. Instead, fostering diverse service options aligns with our shared vision of Bellevue as a city that celebrates diversity and responds to the distinct needs of its people. As we navigate limited resources, it's essential that we as a community work collaboratively, exploring ways to come together for sustainable funding instead of competing individually in an increasingly competitive funding landscape. This competition can fragment our efforts and weaken the sense of unity that strengthens Bellevue. Thank you again for your commitment, and I urge us all to consider the lasting benefits that come from an inclusive approach to funding, one that reinforces the strength of Bellevue's diversity for everyone, especially our youth. I appreciate adding an and not or question to the memory bank of last meeting and hope that we can proudly say Bellevue welcomes and supports diversity as it is our strength. Thank you.
Thank you. The final speaker on our pre-registered list is Barbara Braun.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council leaders, and city leaders. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of People for Climate Action. We applaud and thank you for your continued commitment to address our local greenhouse gas emissions. Congratulations and thank you for keeping and strengthening these commitments in the recently adopted comp plan, where you retain the 2030 goal of 50% reduction and you strengthen the 2050 commitment from 80 to 95% reduction in emissions. The task before us is immense. As tonight's EIS report will show, we have only achieved an 8% decrease in community-wide emissions as of the latest 2022 data. Also in tonight's report, we'll see that 91% of emissions are coming from transportation and buildings. These emissions are from our currently existing buildings and transportation. You stepped up to address this challenge when you took bold action to staff the implementation of the EIS plan. Because of you, our amazing EIS team have come on board and initiated promising programs. But we knew when we began this journey that ongoing bold action would be needed to enable the EIS team to effectively ramp up programs to a scale that would sufficiently reduce our emissions. On the eve of the new biennium, our EIS efforts face grave existential threats from possible federal and state actions largely beyond our control. The good news is our actions in this biennium are in our control. Without reliable, steady funding, what will our awesome EIS team do to ramp up their programs? Without reliable, steady funding this biennium, the EIS efforts will falter and stall, putting our 2030 and 2050 goals beyond our reach. Without reliable, steady funding this biennium, it's hard to see how our efforts will survive. Meeting Bellevue's locally generated greenhouse gas commitments cannot be discretionary. Rather, it is a fundamental responsibility to protect the safety and the health of our residents and should be treated as a fiduciary duty. We know you support this work. We know you don't want it to fail. We need to find the room in this EIS, we need to find the room to fund the EIS program in this biennium and then quickly move to create a new source of reliable funding to sustain the work into the future. Such funding might come from a levy, a climate fee rider in a utility bill, or a tax. We respectfully urge the council to prioritize and continue to take bold action to fund the EIS program. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the end of our pre-registered list. So at this point, I'd ask if there is anyone else joining us tonight who would like to make a comment. We still have a few minutes left. Please raise your hand.
We've had 3 on ESI, though, right?
Yes, agreed. I see Mr. Zimmerman, I see your hand, and there is an exclusion order in place for you. All right, Mayor, I do not see any additional hands. I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. So next up is under council business and new initiatives. And it's funny, we rarely have anything under this category, and we have 2 tonight. So the first one is a recommendation regarding Bellevue Library Advisory Board, and Councilmember Hamilton is bringing this forward, so I will hand it over to him.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to introduce this item tonight. So by way of background, I brought the question regarding the future of the library board forward at the June 25th council meeting. At that time, I sought council approval for staff to work beyond the 8 hours to conduct research, outreach, and analysis, and bring back a recommendation on the future of the Bellevue Library Advisory Board. Staff completed that work, which included engaging directly with members of the Library Advisory Board along the way. As part of that engagement at their last meeting, the board members themselves voted unanimously to recommend a sunsetting of the board. Staff, with my support and concurrence as the council liaison to the library board, are also recommending the council vote to sunset the board. Also, by way of background, library boards have evolved substantially over time, and a sunsetting of the board would be in line with the steady trend of other sunsets that have occurred within the jurisdictions that participate in the King County Library System. And just my own process, along the way, I've given a lot of thought to this as we take a closer look at the board and its role. And the first consideration for me was that I want to be sure that we honor the commitment of the Bellevue Library Advisory Board members. We have engaged, committed, smart board members, but I began to wonder if it was even possible to make good use of all that they bring to the table. And I credit the current board, whose chair is here tonight, and past boards for helping to ensure that community members in Bellevue are confident in the services and support that they receive from King County Libraries. And after getting a much better look at how well King County Libraries has changed with the times and has successfully remained relevant for library users, it was all the more obvious to me that the community is very well served by King County Libraries. I believe that the change we're contemplating is the most productive, effective way for the city to influence the operations of King County Libraries. And instead of creating a separate communication channel, with this change, we can now communicate through King County Libraries' established channels. Our opinions and concerns will move quickly and directly and will be more impactful when they go through already existing communication channels. So at this point, I'll turn to city staff and King County Library System staff to briefly go through the engagement and recommendation and touch on what the future relationship could look like between the city and KCLS should the council accept the recommendation and vote to sunset the library board.
Thank you, Councilmember, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, other council members. I'm Katie Kasimba-Halsey. I am the Assistant Director for Intergovernmental Relations here at the city. And next to me is David Frappier, and he is with King County Library Systems and is the Bellevue Regional Manager
for King County Library Systems. I'd be remiss if I didn't also say that Helena Stevens, who is part of the Intergovernmental Relations team, had intended to be here tonight to present. Unfortunately, she couldn't be with us, but I know that she's very invested in this project and this conversation. So first, tonight's presentation is for direction. Staff are asking and seeking your feedback on whether to direct us to prepare the necessary legislation to formally sunset the Bellevue Library Advisory Board for council deliberation and action at a future meeting, which would likely be in December. Next, I'll go through a quick agenda. I'll cover the library board background, the evolution of library boards. I'll hand it over to David for a King County Library System role and responsibility, pending your feedback, and then finally ask for your feedback and direction moving forward. So first, for a bit of background on the Bellevue Library Advisory Board. The Bellevue libraries were assumed in 1993 by the King County Library System. And before that time, before 1993, the Bellevue Board of Library Trustees served as an advisory role for all of the libraries within Bellevue. But then in about 1993 and thereafter, the council converted the existing trustees into the current Bellevue Library Advisory Board. And around that time, there were questions about how KCLS would be run and how they would oversee libraries in Bellevue. That was a time of great transition. And there were legitimate concerns about the level of service that would be provided in Bellevue and whether KCLS would be successful in serving all residents and visitors. So the board was stood up to assume some responsibilities, and in particular, their responsibilities were to make periodic reports and recommendations to the council and city manager, and to make studies regarding library buildings, property, or equipment. Since that time, many of the duties of the board have been assumed by King County Library System and staff. And reflecting on those changes, as you heard from Councilmember Hamilton, board members have considered many different nuances and opportunities, including city and library resources used to support the board, communications and coordination between the KCLS and the city, the role of the Library Friends Group, and mission and purpose of the Bellevue Library Advisory Board. And after a full review, the board raised the following issues. There's a lack of consistent purpose to develop a substantial and meaningful work plan, and there are redundancy of roles, and that KCLS has assumed many of the board duties as part of their work assignments, and there's very strong groups and volunteers within the city of Bellevue, including the Friends of groups. Therefore, oops, just a second. There we go. Now, one thing I wanted to mention is that these challenges have not been unique just in Bellevue. There has been an evolution of questions and interests of Bellevue library advisory boards, but also advisory boards throughout the region. And so library boards have really evolved substantially over time with a steady trend of sunsetting due to redundancy or lack of purpose. And since 2017, Shoreline, Renton, Issaquah, Mercer Island, Snoqualmie, and Bothell have all sunset their library advisory boards. And I think this is a reflection that King County Library Services and Systems is managing the libraries in the system very well, and that the concerns from the early 1990s have really been alleviated for the most part and continue to get stronger over time. Now, Helena had the opportunity to meet with the board on October 2nd when the board unanimously voted to sunset. And that decision was made to conclude the board service so that the existing members could serve their time in other ways, which David will talk more about in just a moment. And I just want to reflect, I'm very happy to say that Kat Pipkin is here from the Library Advisory Board and can echo those same conversations that I'm presenting to you today. Now, a few different recommendations that were made from the in order to sunset the Library Advisory Board. There was a recommendation to establish a really strong liaison program between the City of Bellevue and the library, and also to ensure that there is an annual report that is provided from the library every year to the council, which David will talk about more. With that, David, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Katie. As Katie said, my name is David Frappier. I am the regional manager for City of Bellevue, which encompasses our 4 libraries here within city limits. And my role today is really to speak a little bit about continuity. How would we, in this new era, continue the services that the Library Advisory Board have provided to council and the city in the past? As Katie said, perhaps the most important duty of the board has been its liaison role to council and the city. And after conversations with our city clerks, with both the city and KCLS's intergovernmental relations teams, we believe that in order to best serve our Bellevue communities, we believe that it would be best served by transferring this liaison responsibility directly to the regional manager responsible for the city of Bellevue, which currently would be me, but it would be any future regional manager as well, in terms of building structures. This transfer would match the similar structures that exist in every other city that has sunset the Library Advisory Board, where the regional manager reports directly to council when it comes to issues of concern, and as Katie said, provides annual updates as to the state of libraries and addresses any particular concerns that citizens might bring up. KCLS is well positioned to take upon this role, given the fact that we have, as Katie said, a number of structures that we put into place that have, in many ways, assumed and replicated a lot of the work that the Library Advisory Board has been doing over these past few decades. This has included providing robust community feedback avenues, including both passive and active methods of collecting feedback from the community. We are also, I'm happy to share, in the process of implementing a full-scale co-creation approach when it comes to our future programming and services within KCLS, meaning that we wish to directly involve members of the community when it comes to designing programs, services, and our collections, so that particularly underrepresented and underserved members of the community will actually see themselves in the work that we do and have a say in how we proceed going forward. As I mentioned, this structure is replicated in largely most of the municipalities where we do provide a library service. So KCLS is well-equipped and experienced when it comes to providing that annual report to city councils. That is something we're well invested in. And ultimately, I think this is a true reflection, if the council elects to go down this direction, it is a reflection of the continued work that we have been doing when it comes to serving the community together. A great example of this is our current work in terms of bringing community court here to the city of Bellevue. And I think that this direction will provide the structure necessary so that the residents of Bellevue still will have their voice heard when it comes to their concerns with the future of libraries. Before I turn things back over to Katie, I'd also like to just highlight the myriad numbers of ways that community members can continue to become involved in the King County Library System and provide both service and feedback in the methods that we operate. These include the fact that all residents of King County are able to provide public comment feedback at our Board of Trustees meeting, and in fact can become a trustee of the King County Library System should they have a desire. We also, as Katie said, have amazing friends groups here in the city of Bellevue. We have the Friends of the Bellevue Libraries, as well as the Newport Wade Library Association, both of which are dedicated towards providing financial support to ensure that the programming services and collections we have here in Bellevue are truly tailored to the needs of the community. Without their support, it would be very difficult to do a lot of the micro-programming that we're able to do. And this is not going away. This is going to be a continued core part of our work going forward. We, of course, also have many volunteer opportunities that anyone in this community is able to take advantage of. So when it comes to providing services and providing opportunity to serve for our residents, we feel like we do have a number of opportunities that are still available, even with the sunset of the board. Katie.
Thank you, David. With that, it is our recommendation as staff and in concurrence with the Bellevue Library Advisory Board that the council sunset the Bellevue Library Advisory Board effective the end of 2024. Before I ask for your direction, I also just wanted to let you know that I know that Helena wanted to be here today, and she will continue to work with Bellevue Library Advisory Board members as you continue your own deliberation. Looking forward, Helena will serve as the city's liaison to the King County Library System, and I'm looking forward to doing so myself in coordination with the Intergovernmental Relations team. And with that, we look for your direction moving forward.
Great, thank you so much. And Councilmember Hamilton, thank you for your homework and hard work in bringing this forward and your service to the board. So we can open this up for comments or questions, and we'll include Chair Pipkin if anybody has questions for her as well. So let's start with you, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. As a former liaison to the County Library Advisory Board, I'd like to make a couple of comments. I don't remember if any one of us on this council panel have served on the library board,
Councilmember.
except for, yeah,
Was it? Okay.
it's only recent. Yeah, anyway, so what I like to say is that it's probably a right action, right time, and right thing to do, because it's always been a very special, interesting experience and structure on all the city's boards and commissions. This is one that the city doesn't really staff it, and it's completely run on its own, and with the King County Library support. And so as a liaison, I do the best I can to make sure that we do our due diligence. The main thing is really to make sure that the Bellevue residents, the Bellevue community, the Bellevue public gets connected to the King County Library Board. There's a communication. I think that's very important. During the time I was on it, I've had the very good fortune, to select a number of advisory board members. And it's amazing the quality of the people that apply for the position. And also it's amazing how dedicated they are. It's amazing what they want to do. It's far beyond what, there's a structure allows them to do, right? So I support this change for sure. And after listening to you for what you plan to do, and you understand the value of community input, the community engagement, I feel very comfortable that this is something that can actually serve the community, serve the Bellevue residents. And because it's more than just library. Library is now a place, a gathering place, a place where everybody meets, everybody goes, especially people from different cultures and people, families. The first thing they do is where they can have the whole family to read, to learn, to explore, to adventure, and to feel comfortable, and to find common place and common events. And so the program you have provided, it's also very amazing that you provide those activities. So but listening, before this come to the council, I have the good fortune of Councilmember Hamilton. He arranged a meeting for me and Kat, and we talk about these things. How do we make sure that the people that are advisory board now, they have the continued opportunity to provide the liaison, provide the communication, provide the input for the library as a value, as an asset to the city. At the same time, you understand what our needs and communication is. So I'm very comfortable, I believe, with what you just described. I hope that I hope the board member knows that. I think the message needs to be clear, that they are welcome, and their desire, their ability, their skill can continue to be finding value to the library system. I see Kat agrees to what I was saying. So I believe we should make this not as a demise, but as a new opportunity, and let people know about it. Let the former board member know about it, so that they can look at this as say, hey, we have a new life, new opportunity, and new challenge to work with. So we have a better connection, better system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, no, I support this as well, and just appreciate all of the efforts. My one question, because we are such a regular attendee of the library and the makerspace too, is for the trustees, are there opportunities for kids and youth to be trustees? Because I think their voice is really important as we think about libraries and the kind of programs that are offered in addition to the adult voices. I'm curious about that.
That's a great question. It's certainly something I can bring up to our executive director, who I know is very eager to come and speak to the board when we do our next annual presentation to council. I can say currently in terms of feedback models, we do have our Teen Volunteer Council, which is one of our most active entities within the King County Library System here in the city of Bellevue. It's made up of preteens and teens from across the city who volunteer to provide consultation and advice on our programming and services, but also actively create programs for the community they have an active say in designing things that they feel are going to be most meaningful and impactful for their peers. So there are some models in place that we could easily look to for expansion down the line. I don't know, younger kids, that would be a different conversation we probably have to look into, but in terms of our teen engagement, that is certainly something that we are very comfortable listening to.
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, actually, I think that maybe for some of the younger kids, the makerspace, they may be even more creative than some of the adults.
Oh, I
in the
guarantee it.
space. So,
It's pretty
thank you.
amazing to go to those programs.
Okay, so I know we're going to make a motion, and I'm going to suggest that we bring this back on consent when it comes back, because I don't think we need more discussion, and we are going to do a commendation of the library board before we get to that vote. So we will have a chance to have the entire board up here in the beginning of the meeting. So I think it's okay to do that. So may I hear a motion?
Yes, I move to direct staff to prepare the necessary legislation to sunset the Bellevue Library Advisory Board.
Second.
To be,
Go ahead, keep going.
to be brought back on consensus at the December 10th, 2024 meeting for an action.
I still second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much. Thank you, Councilmember.
Great job.
And thank you, Chair Pipkin and staff. Okay, next up, we have Councilmember Neuenhuis bringing forward initiative for mandatory minimum sentences for public disorder crimes, and I'll let you introduce that, Councilmember.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to be introducing this item tonight that addresses a pressing issue in our city. To begin with, I want to thank the residents who came down today and sent emails over the last couple of days to share your stories and support about this potential new ordinance. I also want to thank the Washington Retail Association, the Bellevue Police Foundation, and the Bellevue Chamber for weighing in with their support as well. I also want to thank Chief Shirley and City Attorney Tanis for their guidance to this point. The Prosecution Division of the City Attorney's Office prosecutes misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors committed in Bellevue. Currently, there are no mandatory minimum penalty for public disorder crimes. Thus, I'm seeking my colleagues' support to have staff conduct the necessary research and analysis beyond the 8-hour limitation, and if appropriate, bring back options for mandatory minimum sentences for repeat offenders of public disorder crimes. Now, my interest in this initiative stems largely from concerns about retail theft and a significant component of public disorder in our community. After discussions with law enforcement, prosecutors, and participating in really valuable conversations that I've had on retail theft hosted by Governor Gregoire and Challenge Seattle, it's clear this issue warrants our attention. And this is something personally I'm seeing, unfortunately, almost every other day, or at least when I go into my local QFC. In fact, joining us tonight in the back row there is Joyce, who's one of the checkers and one of the great employees of QSC. And literally every day when I walk in there, she gives me an update in terms of how many times they've been hit. In fact, last month, it was 8:30 in the morning. I was going in to have coffee at the Starbucks there, and they had already been hit 4 times. 4 times that morning. And what makes it even more frustrating is that it's by the same people, unfortunately. So research shows that a vast majority of retail theft is conducted multiple times by a relatively small group of criminals. Many of these habitual offenders are often tied to organized retail crime rings, which resell those stolen property to support other criminal activity or lead to other public disorder crimes like assault or car prowling, as we've heard tonight. By addressing retail theft, we can help reduce related criminal activity and improve public safety overall. The cumulative impact of retail theft in our community has led to higher costs for businesses, increased prices for consumers, and potential dangers for Bellevue workers, and a diminished sense of security in our community and amongst residents. So addressing these repeat offenses would benefit residents, visitors, and businesses in our community, as we would seek to reduce recidivism, foster a safer environment, and establish consistent consequences, which is something I heard time and time again from both law enforcement and prosecutors, that without consequences, we will not see a reduction in this kind of activity. So in order to fully explore a mandatory minimum sentencing ordinance in Bellevue, staff will need to review data on public disorder crimes, current sentences, and the success of the ordinance in other cities like Everett and Marysville, who initiated this fairly recently, and which adopted ordinances to impose a minimum sentence of 30 days for repeat offenders. In addition, understanding current planned and proposed programs such as the interlocal agreement with the King County Court, Community Court, drug diversions, and the city's diversity, equity, and inclusion plan should be reviewed for coordination and for alignment. The work of staff should require going beyond the 8-hour maximum time allowed within the council rules. Therefore, tonight I'm asking for council support to have staff perform the necessary work and come back with a recommendation on how mandatory minimum sentencing for repeat offenders of public disorder crimes could potentially be implemented in Bellevue. So with that, Mayor, if it's okay with you, I'll provide the motion, or would you like me to wait on the motion before discussion, or afterwards?
Let's wait on the motion for
Okay.
just a moment, and I'm just going to clarify that we're going to discuss right now whether or not we want to direct staff to conduct an analysis. And if you have any questions you would like addressed in the analysis, to go ahead and bring those forward. So I'm just going to start by saying you added at the end there that we're not just asking for analysis, we're asking for recommendations from staff as well. So I just ask that that be included in the motion when you make the motion. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
It's okay.
I think Councilmember Zahn, I'll let you start. I'm going to call on you first.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Newhouse. You know, we all want to be safe, so it's an important piece to understand what's going on. I do have some questions, and it may be readily known for others, I'm not sure, but is public disorder defined? So that's one of the questions that I have, because it's in here in parentheses, and then it says such as. So I'm just trying to understand the universe of what we're talking about when we say public disorder. And then I also wanted to understand.
So Trisna, maybe you can give us a definition of public disorder.
Would you mind?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. There is not a definition of public disorder crimes in our code currently. Marysville and Everett, those two jurisdictions that Councilmember Neuenhuis cited earlier, they define what would fall under public disorder crimes in their ordinances. Typically, it is about criminal trespass, theft, some assault cases, drug-related crimes. but that would be part of what would be considered in looking at this ordinance, what crimes would fall under public disorder crimes.
Okay, and then when we talk about doing the analysis, are we looking at only cities within Washington State? Or, the National League of Cities has a public safety committee, and I know they do quite a bit of work, especially if we're talking about a new definition that is not a state definition. I would like to understand the side of the breadbox of what we're gonna be looking at. And then it talks about in here, should be reviewing for coordination and alignment. I think if we are gonna vote on this, that instead of it should be, that it will be reviewed, because community court will be brand new to us. We don't even completely understand how that's gonna work, so I would like to better understand kind of the landscape of the whole thing in how the context of this fits into that. And then when we talk about analysis, these bed nights are not free, so I think we also need to understand what the financial piece associated with, with the sentencing.
So I
needs to
hear
look
you
like.
asking to include these points in the analysis.
Yeah, and
Okay,
really how we measure success.
okay, that's another one. Councilmember Lee.
This is Councilmember Jaron Newhouse proposal, which strikes a resonance with many of us, including the public has spoken very clearly. I think we're talking about a situation that we have noticed that we all realize no matter how we define or how definitive or how small or how big they are, when we analyze them, that's what we really are supposed to do. It's when we analyze, is through understanding, looking at statistics, looking at other cities, looking at the consequences, and that's after they have this kind of information, then I believe that the council will have the opportunity to look into it and to consider, and then we can have a public conversation. And so I'm not sure, whether we can limit it or not. I believe that when there's an element like this, a criminal element, no matter how small it is, we need to stop it. We need to figure it out and understand what the consequence, what the future consequence can be, what significance it may create. Because I know that I completely agree with the public testimony. Even as of 4 or 5 years ago, during the COVID, I've been approached by many citizens. I have myself witnessed, and I've talked to the businesses in stores and shops, and they all have uniformly saying that people are just going to the store at random, taking things out, regarding the employees and whatever. And even though they may not have created any physical danger at the moment, but it propagates, it continues, it escalates.
So I'm assuming that you're for moving this forward?
Yes, I'm for
Okay.
bringing this forward.
Councilmember Zahn is not limiting the scope.
Yeah.
She's asking to include some things in their analysis.
Thank you.
Just to be
I'm
clear.
trying to, we need to include as broad as possible.
Okay.
And let the police, let the public safety give us their analysis, because we don't know what they're going to bring to us. I'm no expert in publicity. And then the council can have the benefit of the
Yes,
public.
we can. Okay, let's let somebody else
Thank
talk.
you.
I think Councilmember Stokes, did you
So I
have your
support.
hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm in favor of us looking at this. I do want some questions in this and what, our authority to make changes in sentences, and it's not really clear as to what the sentences we're talking about here. I know this is just an overall piece, but obviously there are already sentences here, and I'm hoping we come back and do something more than just mandatory minimum and have that so we understand. It's kind of hard to say this is a good thing to do if we don't really understand what we're actually putting in there. And I think it's appropriate to try to deal with this, and I do hope that it's not just a reaction and it's something that actually looks at the realities out there and what is actually going on and not just some perceptions of things, because it is a very serious issue. And I'm hoping that we will have analysis and really good conversations with the police department and the people who are actually working in this. And it needs to be really clear in terms of what is not working now and why something proposed will actually make a difference and what the cost would be and all these factors. Because if we want to do this and put this out there, and this is a big change in things and affects all kinds of people's lives, we need to be sure that this is something that's really done more to actually change things as opposed to just react against things. So I'm sure that's what you're focusing on. I just want to make sure it gets out there so that we're actually going to come up with something that will be, that works and doesn't get us off on tangents on something else.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Councilmember Hamilton?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate Councilmember Neuenhuis bringing this forward. I'm glad that we're looking at casting a wide net with data and opinions and input. So I think that's how we're going to arrive at the best possible solution for this and look forward to supporting it. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor, any comments or questions? I'll just say that I'm going to hand this to Councilmember Neuenhuis. I'm just going to say that I think the goal here is to reduce crime. And so with that in mind, I would like to hear the staff recommendations and know whether this indeed is going to help us reduce crime. So that being one of the goals. I'll say that Senator Maria Cantwell called me last week and asked me why, when crime is going up in every city around us, why Bellevue's crime statistics are going down. So even though we read on some of our next door and social media that crime is getting worse and worse and worse, well, there is crime going on in our city, but the data shows us that in our city it's actually going down. But that doesn't mean that we can relax. So I appreciate this recommendation, especially for the retail crime that we are witnessing. And so if this can help us get a handle on that, I'd be curious to know what the recommendations are. So, yeah.
I agree with you, and so I want to just clarify if the ask includes recommendations and options, because it sounds like the way it's written, staff is going to do analysis, and they're going to come back and make a recommendation
It's exactly
about
what you're going to hear.
whether this makes sense or not, but there may be other things you learn that you might recommend instead, or?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Comments, recommendations, and options.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. Why don't you read your motion and we'll
Okay.
see.
Okay. I move to direct staff to conduct the necessary research and analysis beyond the 8-hour limitation, and if appropriate, bring back options and a recommendation for mandatory minimum sentences for repeat offenders of public disorder crimes in Bellevue for council consideration.
Second.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So now I'm still confused, because this is saying options for mandatory minimum sentences, not
So you,
options for minimum mandatory or other options that in the research and analysis, staff might find that they might recommend instead.
so you
This
could
seems a
say,
little more limited in,
bring back options and recommendations for repeat offenders of public disorder crimes for council considerations and to include consideration of mandatory minimum sentences.
We can bring back the options and recommendations. Those recommendations may not be mandatory minimum sentences. That's entirely possible.
Yeah.
But the data and the conversation that we have will highlight that. So I think the motion will suffice.
Well,
I
it does
just wanted to
say
confirm. Thank you.
options and recommendations for mandatory minimum sentences. So I think that we can open it up to be about what we can do best for, to deal with repeat offenders of public disorder crimes, and the analysis should include mandatory minimum sentences. Is that acceptable for you?
I think the motion I gave was acceptable for this, because that will open it
Trizna,
up.
do those two equate to you?
Yes, I think I have clear direction. I think we are going to be looking at various data, information, analysis, and be bringing that back to council for consideration related to repeat offenses of public disorder crimes, which certainly may include mandatory minimum sentences to address those.
Right.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we have 2 study session items. We're going to do the first one, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back for the second one. So, city manager, our official city manager, could you please introduce it?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. So yes, this first study session will provide a council an update of the approach and scope for the proposed Sustainable Bellevue Plan update, as well as an update on the implementation progress so far in the 2021 to 25 plan. As you are very aware, we've had significant interest from the council and the community on how we're doing on the progress of the current plan towards the targets, and also what could be considered in an update to the strategy. And that's what this work is intended to do, is to help provide some options to answer those questions. So from community development, we have Jennifer Ewing, our sustainability manager, Tara Johnson, our planning director, and then in the audience, we also have Jamie Robinson, municipal planning and systems director. And with that, I will hand it over to Jennifer to kick off the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, and thank you, City Manager. So it's a pleasure to be here this evening. We're here, of course, to provide you with an update of our progress on the ESI plan. And really the emphasis tonight is we're going to be talking about our next phase of actions within the ESI plan. So we're here requesting direction from council to initiate work on the ESI plan for the next 5-year period, so 26 to 2030. Just to provide some context, council adopted the updated plan, or the existing plan, in December 2020, which has a 5-year time period, which we're closing in on. And so, as you may recall from our quarterly updates, we've made significant progress. Let's see. Can you go to the next slide? So the intent this evening, we're going to start off with providing you with an overview of the progress we've made. As you know, we come to you several times a year to provide you with that progress update. And then we're going to highlight some of the successes that we've had over the last many years. And then the emphasis is, of course, going to be what we're moving forward with a plan update, a little overview on the scope, and then, of course, the timeline and schedule. So that, I'm going to turn things over to Jennifer.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, and Council. We'll do sort of a quick overview of some of our progress, and there's a bit more detail in the agenda memo and then in the attachment, lots of detail on all the different actions in the plan. So we've been monitoring our implementation progress, looking at how we're doing on implementing all the actions in the plan, and we provide a brief update on all of those actions each quarter. We have, made pretty significant progress on about 85% of the actions in the plan. Some of them are, ongoing work, or, we've initiated the projects or programs, but more to be done. Quite a few of the actions are really things that have been incorporated into more of our ongoing operations, so not necessarily a one-time project, but more something that is part of more of our city processes. And then there's a handful that were also more kind of discrete projects that we can mark off as being completed. So some of the ones where we haven't made as much progress, we are looking at, beginning work on those next year. So we are technically in year 4 of the 5-year plan this year. So as we move into next year, we'll be continuing to both implement the current plan, continuing to advance all the work we're doing, while at the same time, kind of going back to planning mode and looking at what else we can be doing. So to highlight some progress on some of the key initiatives for both the actions in the plan, focused more on the entire community, and then I'll talk about some of the actions in the plan for our city operations. So when we did the plan update, and really kind of after completing the update, 2 of the top priority things we really heard a lot from the community about was wanting to see the tree code updated, and then putting in place some sort of program to support residential energy efficiency and electrification. So the tree code was completed earlier this year, which is really a major milestone for Bellevue, and really responds to the top goal of the community from this planning effort, which I think is a great accomplishment. And then we've also made pretty significant progress on standing up Energy Smart East Side, a collaboration with 5 other East Side cities to provide incentives to low and moderate income households to install heat pumps. And then we're continuing to look at how we can grow and expand that program. Other policies, other priorities we heard was more programming and support for commercial buildings in Bellevue, which make up about a quarter or so of greenhouse gas emissions in Bellevue. And then as part of the most recent comp plan update, we expanded the environment element to be the climate and environment element. So there's a number of new or kind of updated policies in there related to climate and sustainability. And then I think over the past several years, we've certainly heard an interest from the community to have more staff capacity and resources for advancing the plan implementation, where there's also been really significant progress. For our municipal operations actions, the biggest focus areas for this work are on, making our buildings more energy efficient and decarbonizing them, and then working on greening our fleet. We are really looking to lead by example, and have made really significant progress in terms of reducing emissions from our city operations. Some kind of major projects happening maybe a little more behind the scenes are planning for pretty significant retrofits to the Bellevue Service Center to bring that facility into compliance with the Clean Building Standard, and then also to prepare that facility for providing the charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, for our city fleet vehicles that park there. So a lot of work kind of in the planning stages there that will be moving forward in the next couple of years. And then also some of the other big accomplishments, have been around buying renewable energy for about 70% of our city energy use. And that's through a special program through PSE. So shifting gears to talk more about the plan update process. We're looking at this about a 1-year process for updating the plan. We are really looking at this as an update. So really kind of trying to build on the foundation we have with the current plan, keeping the scope of it more or less the same in terms of looking at community actions, municipal operations, keeping the focus areas of climate, energy, mobility and land use, natural systems and waste, keeping those the same. So the real focus is going to be on, what's next? We've made a lot of great progress. What else can we be doing to either build on some of our existing work, or are there, some new opportunities that maybe weren't there several years ago that we should be thinking about? So the first phase of the work that we're asking to launch tonight would be to just review our goals and targets. Looking at, some potential update to some of the goals and targets to align with the comp plan policies, or some other plan updates and changes that have happened over the past couple of years. We're looking at, I'll talk a little bit more about our community engagement approach, but that's going to follow the 3 phases of the plan update. So looking at re-engaging the community on the work we've been doing and talking about the overarching goals for this work, And then phase 2 is really kind of where a lot of the substance of the plan update is going to happen, where we really look at our progress and analyze what else we should be doing to achieve our various environmental goals. And then for phase 3, putting out a draft plan for public comment. So we'll have council touch points along the way, kind of at the sort of nearing the end of each phase to kind of share what we've learned in our analysis and our outreach, and then proceed to the next phase. In terms of the scope of the comp plan or of the plan update, one of the big focal areas, like I mentioned, will be, seeing how the ESI plan can help implement some of the new comp plan policies related to climate and sustainability, updating the plan to take into account some of the new goals or targets in the comprehensive plan, in particular, the updated long-term climate change goal of reducing emissions 95% by 2050, which is essentially a net zero emissions goal. And then we've always heard a lot of interest and excitement around the wedge analysis. So that's the analysis we do to try to estimate what types of actions will have the most impact in terms of helping us achieve our emissions reductions goals. So we'll be updating that with the new long-term goal, and then also doing a deeper dive into strategies we can implement in Bellevue to achieve that, in addition to all of the federal and state actions that also help get us to our goals. And then looking to add a little more emphasis in the plan on climate resilience. So how do we plan for the long-term impacts of climate, incorporate that into a lot of our capital project planning, but also operations, and then also another focus on how can we decarbonize our buildings further. Some new topics to consider that either we lightly touched on in the last plan update, or maybe they were not included. Some things we've heard over the past several years. We've certainly heard a lot of interest in the electric landscaping equipment, so that will be addressed. More focus in looking at medium and heavy duty vehicles and how those could be either electrified, or looking at other alternative fuels for those vehicles in our fleet. A little more focus on water conservation. I think that's becoming kind of a bigger concern as our summers are getting hotter and hotter. And then also looking at, okay, what are some opportunities to further integrate climate and sustainability into a lot of our city processes, like purchasing, capital project planning, and budgeting. And then finally, looking at what it's going to take to put us on the path to achieve our goals, and then what are some different funding options that might help support that. So looking at different approaches there as well. And then for our outreach, we're going to be doing some pretty broad outreach to our residents and community at large, kind of a number of different approaches with surveys, town halls, going out into the community, tabling and just chatting with folks. And then also more kind of targeted outreach. We're going to be working with a couple of community-based organizations to really help us diversify our outreach more, so we can try to meet and engage with folks who maybe wouldn't otherwise participate in the process, and hear from different voices. And then also kind of more targeted outreach to the business community, other institutional stakeholders, to understand how some of the actions that might benefit or impact, say, commercial buildings, for example, to get input on those. So yeah, like I said earlier, the outreach will kind of mirror the 3 phases of the plan update process. So yeah, with that, that pretty much summarizes the plan update approach. So, and to recap, we are requesting direction to proceed with the update to the Sustainable Bellevue Plan. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Deputy Mayor, let's start with you. You council members on the K4C. So
Yes. Thank you so much. Great update, and appreciate all of your dedication in our environmental strategy goal, and it is a very multi-year approach. I have 3 questions. The first one is, what is our ultimate goal of this plan update or our previous plan update?
I think the goal is to identify the actions that we want to work on over the next 5 years.
What are the goals of those, achieving those action items?
The goals of achieving those actions would be to, help us achieve our environmental goals that we have in the plan.
And how are we doing about them so far after 4 years in the 5 years plan?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. So we'll be coming back at our next council touch point with a more comprehensive update on how we're doing on our progress towards all of the environmental goals. So we're kind of working on the update to those now, and then coming back probably in February with an update on how we're doing.
So we created a plan 4 years ago, and when you come back and you show how do we have a grading system that when you come back in February and say we are here, then do we have a benchmark we have set before 4 years ago that, okay, we created this plan and all of these amazing action items. I'm talking about just the community part.
Don't we have this in the packet?
We, let's see, in the packet, we have the information on how we're doing with all the specific actions. And then I think we included the information, we did include the 2022 environmental performance metrics. So I wouldn't say we exactly have a grading system, but we do try to summarize, if we're trending on the right direction, not on track, that sort of thing.
So, and that belongs to 2 years ago.
So we always do it for the previous year's data. So right now we have the 2022 data, and then we're working on the 2023 report.
So we don't have the data of 2024. We never created a benchmark to see what at the milestone of 4 years in, where should we be? So then I'm struggling to even know, I've heard significant progress when Tara start talking and you start talking. And to me, the significant progress is just achieving some of the actions. Like you have a list of actions, but I don't think there is any correlation between check marking those actions and receiving and getting to the point of our ultimate goal that we have. Is that correct assessment, or am I not understanding
I would say some of the actions, the impact of those may take time to really to show up in the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So I think, there is, that is accurate that not every single thing has like an immediate significant impact. Some of these, standing up new programs and things like that does take time, and then to really kind of scale things up takes time.
I would just add on that phase one is really looking at establishing priorities, so that will require a lot of analysis to figure out what actions we've made significant progress, and for those that we haven't, why haven't we? And are there updates to those actions that are needed or new actions that are needed to achieve our goals?
You're talking about the phase one of the future.
Of the future, yes.
So we are just in planning phase for the past 6-7 years. We are not getting to any significant improvement in reaching to our goals so far. We are again going to another phase of planning.
Well, you in the packet, don't you show that the city of Bellevue itself has reduced greenhouse gas emissions almost to the goal? Like you've got 90%, but that's within our city goals, but then we have the global city goals, and that's a different.
Right.
100%. And I applaud all of you for the city work. We are doing a great job. It is in our control. But my main concern is the community side.
Mm-hmm.
And so let me just wrap up my comments. I believe we should, on the community side, I think there's significant progress. On the city side, I accept that. I don't think we have achieved a significant progress in receiving the community goal that we have for 2030 and moving forward. We don't have a benchmark. We have established this 4 years ago. If we had the correct data right now, we don't even know if we are doing good. Just the trajectory of the direction, I don't think is sufficient. And I think if we have that, we are not going to the good place. So we are definitely not achieving. And I think the timeline is great. My whole point is is a budget issue, and it's a budget time. So I think if we are really sincere to get to the place that we set is our goal is, and I think it should come to the council a budget proposal that, hey, this is what we required a city to get to our goals. And I think the council can vote yes or no about that. That's our hand. But I have not seen that yet. My last question is, in creating this new 5-year plan, are you going to, what valuable lesson we have learned from the last time that we did this for the upcoming plan update? From last plan update, what we learned so far 4 years in, that we are going to incorporate in the next 5 years plan update? You can just answer me later. We don't need to answer right now.
I think the hard thing about this is the way that we measure our success. And so it's not like we take an air sample and we measure how much carbon's in the air, and we can compare it to 5 years ago when we started this effort. Can you describe how we measure how we're reaching our goals? It's pretty convoluted.
Yeah, it's complicated. The sort of quick answer is we try to use, we follow the sort of national standards for how cities should report on greenhouse gas emissions. So we're kind of following all the guidance and protocols. But yeah, for the entire city, we do look at all the energy used in all of our homes and businesses. We look at all of the vehicle trips in Bellevue. Those are kind of the two biggest sources. And then we look at, we use kind of estimates for what's the makeup of the vehicles in Bellevue. So we actually can kind of take into account that Bellevue's at, I think, about 9% electric vehicles. So there are some things like that, that are sort of buried in there, but part of the assumptions. But yeah, we are trying to, it is a model essentially that looks at, that takes into account different inputs, with the electricity or energy use and vehicle trips being kind of the biggest sources of emissions. But also looking at waste and off-road vehicles and equipment and that sort of thing.
So if you go to slide 8.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Mary, for taking too
No,
long.
it's fine.
That's my last thing.
Yep.
So this is slide 8, the solid line, black solid line, that I think the latest data is 2022, 2021, I cannot see, 2022 maybe. That solid line is the measurement of our MTCO2 for the city of Bellevue, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And hopefully at some point you have it updated for 2024, and we can make the projection of dashed line, solid line.
Correct.
So to me, this is, and am I right that in 2050, that's our goal, 95%? So this is one way we can measure our success, and that's our ultimate goal.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this update. I think this is a really critical point for us, because the next 5-year plan literally gets us to 2030, which we're supposed to be at 50% greenhouse gas reduction by then. So, I agree with my colleague. We need to be aligning our budget for what are the actions. And I appreciate the fact that, this is a very summarized wedge analysis. So the other ones that you've shown before has all of the different strategies and how they contribute to that reduction, so we can see how it's going. And I do see, and I appreciate the fact that with the addition of more staff, that we have multiple actions that are moving, we're teeing things up to move to the next level. And so this is the time where we need to double down on these investments and the actions that we need to take. Especially when I think about the fact that in one of the attachments, you show that greenhouse gas emissions has gone up. So coming out of COVID, right, the municipal commuting has gone up. And so there's a number of areas where what we're seeing is that it's not trending in the right direction yet. And so we're going to have to do more in terms of investments to make that happen. You know, the other thing is that purple line on this graph is it looks like it accounts for the fact that there is federal funding, IRA, tax credits, as well as the state's Climate Commitment Act. So if the initiatives next week changes that trajectory, we are actually going to see a bigger hole in our investment than what we're seeing now in that purple line. So I think as we start this work, we will know more about whether we actually have to infuse even more investments into it, or if the purple line is indeed the baseline that we're working with. So I think that's going to be really important. Just wanted to reiterate, yes, electric landscape equipment is something we hear from the community about a lot, so I'm glad to see that. And then I really think that the medium and heavy-duty vehicles is one we need to revisit, because 5 years ago, I think we thought the industry would be a lot slower than we are, but the fact that we just plugged in shore power for cruise ships earlier this week means that if we're plugging in container and cruise ships, surely we can work on medium and heavy-duty vehicles. So I think that's an important piece. I think that the other one I would like to better understand as we move forward is now the King County SCAP, their Sustainable Climate Action Plan also does wedge analysis. So are we doing our own, or are we actually able to leverage their wedge analysis where we just take our jurisdiction from that? So there's a little bit more coordination with the county and other cities. So that's one of my questions. And then love the fact that we have a resiliency plan in there. And if we can pursue some federal grants to do resiliency planning, that'll be really important. Today, there was an infra day where we heard from a lot of different entities talking about infrastructure, and part of climate action was part of it. So as you move forward, one thing I heard is that the city of Portland's actually doing a lot around low carbon concrete. So as we do our own CIP, I think we need to be looking at what are those things that we could be doing with our contractors to look at that embodied carbon, low carbon concrete. And then water conservation, maybe we could do a demo project for rainwater capture. And then lastly, on the outreach, I want to make sure that we're going to do a lot of outreach to our youth and our kids, because I think that they are very concerned about this. I think they also have some really great ideas. So if we could leverage even more leaning into that. But I am all in for getting moving on this. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. Certainly appreciate that we've made some significant progress on our environmental stewardship plan. Especially pleased to see the city do so well with our municipal operations goals. And I think that this update is going to be very valuable. I like your approach with it overall. Appreciate the comments that I've heard from my colleagues so far. Kind of want to follow up a little bit on that. I noted in the agenda memo that the community-wide emissions are not on track to achieve the 2030 goal of a 50% greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So just based on that, I'm curious if part of the analysis will include how we get back on track to achieve our 2030 goals.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of a big focus, to really look at what is it going to take for us to achieve the goals.
Okay. And including the cost to do so, kind of along the lines of what the deputy mayor was talking about as far as looking at the budget and what is it going to take to pay
I
for
think
that?
to the extent we can, some types of projects might require sort of an initial estimate, and then, you know, sometimes more work needs to be done to really get a better estimate of costs. But yeah, I think that is something we're interested in looking at.
Yeah, that would be great. An estimate, kind of a range of cost, I think would be really helpful. So, and then looking beyond 2030 to 2050, if we don't achieve our 2030 goals, is it possible to make up time after 2030 and to achieve our 2050 goals?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. And will the update include a plan, including estimated costs for getting us on track for the 2050 goals?
Yeah, we'll have to think about how far out we can sort of, project the costs. I think cities often set these long-term goals, but then, and we know a lot of the actions we need to do, but to really, it is a dynamic situation where it would be difficult, I think, to really know for sure what things might cost really far out into the future and what sort of interventions the city may need to take, and it's hard to know for sure. In 10 years' time, it could be electric heavy-duty vehicles are the same cost as diesel, so we don't, it's just kind of the market will make the transition. So I think a lot of the work that needs to be done now is where the market, isn't quite there yet. So, yes, I think we will kind of try to do the best we can, but some of the costs will be looking probably a little shorter.
Well, of course.
term.
And
Yeah.
yes, I mean, the best you can, but putting something in,
Yeah.
I think would really be helpful.
Yeah.
I would find that really helpful. And I just think too, in general, about goals, I think it's good to have stretch goals, but I don't want to set a goal that we know we can't meet. So I think we have to be clear about our goals, which I think we have been, but then I think we need to be honest with ourselves about how well we have achieved the goals and then kind of have a reset. So I think that the system that we have in place to come back to this, in 5 years, that makes a lot of sense to me. But I want to be clear. I don't want to be wishy-washy about any of the goals or how well we're doing achieving them. And I know there are a lot of factors that figure in to, how well we can achieve those goals, a lot of reasons why perhaps we may not be achieving them. So certainly not as a criticism. Again, I think, we've done a very good job, but I think being clear, setting a goal, one we can achieve, and one that maybe takes a stretch, I'm all for that. So definitely look forward to this process getting underway. Appreciate all of your efforts so far. Look forward to being engaged and supporting the update as you go forward. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Nieuwenhuis.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, great conversation so far, and Jennifer and Tara, thank you for the presentation. Certainly, really appreciate and understand the priorities and the action items that you've got on here. But I think, to be honest, I'm kind of struggling with this a little bit when we're asked to give direction, but we don't have the necessary data or measurements or metrics in order to really provide any direction. Maybe direction would be better served when we get that next big update and we can actually see the kind of impact that these action items are doing. But right now, this feels, and I think this is some of the frustration or what the deputy mayor was referencing, is it feels more like a checklist to me. Important checklist, important action items, but it's hard for me to give direction unless I can clearly see what the costs are associated with these priorities or with these actions and the impact that they're having. And it sounds like the types of data that we're getting back is a little bit kind of squishy, if in terms of the example of counting car trips into the city, which might be one data point, but is it really reflective of getting single use or single drivers out of their cars? I mean, I'm not sure we can make that direct correlation to greenhouse gases, et cetera, or we can to a certain extent, but it isn't enough. So I'm just kind of struggling with that a little bit, and some of these other new topics that we're looking at too, which are great, and we should keep them on that topic list. But water conservation, I think, given the cost of water these days, everybody's pulling back on water already, given the cost of our water bills of late. In terms of electric landscaping equipment, that would be great, especially from a noise perspective, as we've heard from a lot of folks that are woken up by that. But is that really going to have the kind of impact that we want in order to achieve all our goals. So I know these are some of my unvarnished comments on this, but again, I feel at a little bit of a loss in terms of how much direction we can give you as a council, when I would really appreciate some more tangible results, and then going forward action in terms of here's where we're seeing the biggest bang for our buck. Here's how we're going to achieve our goals by doing X, Y, and Z, and this is how much it's going to cost. I think I'd be in a much better position to give definitive direction at this time. As of right now, I think everything you have on here is a priority. Then again, when everything's a priority, then, as they say, nothing's a priority. So I think the next time we have this conversation and we get a more definitive update in terms of progress, that's the time to give direction. So there really wasn't a question there, but Jennifer would be happy to listen to any feedback that you might have on that.
Yeah, no, thank you for your comments. We appreciate that. Yeah, I would say just maybe to kind of clarify where we are asking for direction to update the plan. So a part of that will be looking at our progress in terms of all of our different environmental metrics, and then coming up with recommendations for what to do next. What's kind of the range of costs or impacts of those things. So we would be, along the way asking for direction on those new initiatives.
Okay.
So, yeah, the direction for now is to kind of just start that body of work.
Gotcha. Okay, so I may understand that you technically might need direction tonight. However, I see this as more of an update, or at least a head nod to go ahead and get started so that you can provide us with the necessary information and data. Show here's the direction we're going. So, okay. Thank you.
More to come.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarity.
Yes.
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is, we're meeting now, and we met sometime back on coming up to 2024, 25, and it's, and the perception is that this is something, 2 years off and going on for another 5 years or more, and how can we actually rationally give you any advice on where to go and this and that, because that's basically what your job is putting it together. But it's good to get this review. I think what is missing in terms of looking at this in a linear fashion, and when the public and other people are looking at this, it's like, well, wait a minute, what do we do to up to 24 and 25, and how does this connect? I think that's something we're going to need to see is how does this connect to what we're doing now? And the other issue is, do you have the staff to actually continue to implement things up to in 25, and also it's going to take a lot of time to do 2630 on that, and that's a concern I have. I think you're doing really good work on this, and what you're pinpointing what we need to work on. And this is not something that's written in stone. This is your plan, and we'll have other conversations on that, and it's a great job of that. But I think that's part of it. It's just so difficult to get your, we don't normally think about things that are 10 or 20 years in a whole piece together, but you have to with these things because it's so important. So I think it's a big help. It's a great start, but it's we're going to have more conversations on this, and we need to have a little more of what do you that we need to get advice to you on something. What you don't, you're just telling us this is what you're doing, and then look at where you need some guidance on it if you need that. So it's probably the most difficult job in terms of keeping things going in a straight direction that we have in the city. So I think I think you've heard a lot of things on this. I mean, there are a lot of things we could focus on. We're not talking about that tonight exactly, but things like residential electrification, it seems to be going pretty well. And I have a question: can we make a bigger dent on electrification of multifamily buildings? But we're not. You're tempted to want to look at these things in this, and so I think it's difficult for us to say other than this looks like a good plan. We appreciate that, and we'll be getting into the details later. So it's good work, though. I appreciate it.
Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, this is very, very challenging, what you're doing. I mean, for us to help you, to give you direction especially. I think Councilmember Newhouse really said it very appropriately. He's a little bit not in the position to give you directions. To me, I think I'm a whole lot not sure what direction I can give you. Really reflected on what Deputy Mayor, in his frustration, by asking you, what's the benchmark? What's our result, what we're looking at? Are we working on plan? Are we working on actions? And that's a very difficult question to answer because that's what you have to work on. What benchmark you have, if it's benchmark at all, what the result you're looking at, it's going to be, it's defined by other people, by variables, by the situation that happens, by the federal government, state government definitions. What's the mission? What are we doing that reflects success or failure? I mean, we don't have a precise definition scientifically to work on. So you're moving with you're doing your work based on moving target. And we don't have that moving target. We don't know what it is. We have to listen to you. So we're going to direct you based on the information you give us. So it's very, very challenging, not to mention frustrating. And so I appreciate what the public, they are out there living the real thing, and they sense what's going on. And each of them is feeling what they see as indication of the environment that's getting better or worse. And it's all the things that you're doing and all the pieces you do, it's going to fit into the overall program we're working on, but it only addresses pieces of what the environment is reacting to, responding to, what we have to do to make the whole thing work in peace. So it's very hard. So that's why I sounded like you don't have any answers, but you've got the best you got. And nobody can really expect anymore. So I think this is a conversation we just have to have. People who are interested, committed, who experience it, who appreciate it, and who continue to discuss it and figure out ways, whether it be in treatment of the water, looking at the fishes, how they're flowing, which year they come in, which year they don't come in, and what does the climate look like? Do we have big storm or not? How much the sun comes up? It's hard. It's very hard. So my thought is, this is a very important topic. I think we've come to a conclusion after many, many years. It's not going to go away. This is what's going to affect our life, our daily life, our life of the future. And it requires a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion by the public, not just the people who is so involved and active and take the time to understand, and not just us who listen. Say, well, we're going to pass our judgment. We're not. Why? I think this is something we need to establish a commission, Environmental Services Commission, have comprising of citizens, activists, other people, technology, maybe even whoever, to continue to really dig into this, educate all of us, so that we're constantly following, tracking it, so when things change, move, when the wind blows, when the air shifts, we can talk in a language we understand, and how can we respond? How can we coordinate and communicate with other government agencies, with other environmental organizations, with other people in the rest of the world, actually, not just us. So that, I want to post it to the council. I don't know what's going to cost in the budget. This is the right time to think about it. You know,
I'm
maybe we
going
need
to
to
suggest
consider
that
some of that. I'm
we leave that for like a retreat. So we've lost one of our commissions. Maybe we can talk at the retreat next year, early next year, about if we want to create another one. You know we have an environmental services commission because you're
Yes.
the liaison,
But it's
you're
completely different.
right.
Most people who sign
I'm
up,
just
they expect to do
clarifying-
environment.
I'm just
stewardship, and
clarifying
then we're not
that you're
really.
asking-
So I think there's a need for that.
Thank you.
So I appreciate you
Clarifying that you're
hearing me,
asking-
and I agree with you. I'm happy to make the proposal, and it's at the wishes of the council.
So
Thank you.
I'm clarifying that he's asking for like a separate commission. And so.
Yeah, not the Environmental
Okay.
Service Commission.
Thank you.
Separate commission, just talking about climate.
Right, we got that.
Stewardship, environmental stewardship.
Okay, so isn't it my turn, or have you not gone yet? Have you not gone yet?
A little bit first, but
I'm sorry.
you've talked to us several times. I'll go. Go ahead.
Well,
No, go ahead, go ahead.
didn't you go before
I want-
Councilmember Lee?
He did.
Yeah, I said a few more
Okay, let me,
things. I did.
let me go ahead and say my piece here before I forget. So I think what's really hard here is that when we measure our greenhouse gas emissions, a lot of that is reliant on the fuel that we're using, the energy that we're using. And since we're using a company, we're reliant on one company that is not using a clean energy source, that lowers our score significantly. So I'd like to ask you, and I don't know if you can do this off the top of your head, if we were using a completely clean energy source, how close would we be to our 2030 goal today?
Yep. So Washington State has the Clean Energy Transformation Act that was passed several years ago that requires utilities to transition to renewable energy by 100% renewable energy by 2045. And then I think for 2030, they have to be at maybe 80% renewable energy. So if PSE is on track for that, then we would be very close to meeting our goals. So I think, a lot of how we proceed and progress is dependent really on kind of implementation of various state laws, but that's probably the biggest one that has the biggest impact.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So I would also like to ask that when you're doing an analysis, that we look at just, maybe this is a crazy idea, but can we consider hydrogen cell fuel for our municipal cars, for the trucks and things? Just, I don't know if you already have that on your list of things to look at, but when I was in Korea, there's an entire town that's all hydrogen cell fueled, and all their buses and all their trucks and vehicles. And so of course they have to have the infrastructure, but with our own city vehicles, I wonder if we could have a infrastructure in our municipal yard. So it's just something to think about. All right, that was it for me. Did you have something else you wanted to add, Councilmember Stokes?
Yeah, I want to move this forward.
Okay. Go ahead and make a motion.
Okay, and I think we've had a really good discussion on this. We're talking about now going forward, not things we're doing right now. And I think it's a great conversation. I move to direct staff to initiate the update to the Sustainable Bellevue Environmental Stewardship Plan for 2026 to 2030.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So we're going to take a little break. We'll come back at 10 after. Okay, we're going to resume with our second study session item. City Manager, would you like to introduce this one?
Thank you, Mayor, council members. This is a study session where the staff, our budget staff, will summarize the process for the preliminary budget and leading towards the final budget tonight. And they are going to cover the public engagement, numerous council conversations over the past month, notable themes that have been drawn from the memory bank and your discussions at council meetings, and the questions that are included in the memory bank that have been answered by staff. So this is information only, but it provides a baseline for council discussion in advance of November 12th, which is when we'll have our final budget hearing, and we'll be seeking council direction to prepare the final budget. So with that, I'd like to welcome back John Risha, our Chief Financial Officer, and Evan Phillips, our Financial Strategy and Performance Director. And I'll hand it over to John to walk through the material that frames the council discussion tonight.
Thank you, City Manager Carlson. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. I'm excited that we're coming into focus and we've had some great discussions. Tonight is information only, but we are listening with broad ears to hear your discussion to help us get to a point so that on November 12th, you can give us final direction. Our goal for tonight, review of calendar and adoption legislation, discussion of expenditure resources and expenditures. Evan will be reviewing some of your key discussions, things that we have heard to reflect back some of those comments and conversations. And then we will tee up for your conversation and gather some additional input and listening from your conversation tonight. Where we're at in the process right now, we have wrapped up our strategic target area conversations and are truly moving into final deliberations and guidance, getting ready for the November 12th public hearing and final direction and potential adoption on November 19th. Again, as we prepare, council legislation will be a series of different ordinances and resolutions that will come before you. There will probably be somewhere between 11 and 14 pieces of legislation that will come as part of those various packages in a variety of forms. And this is the same list that you have seen reflected many times through our process. As we begin to think about the preliminary budget resources, I want to reflect back as we think about those revenues that we have in place. Our utility funds are one of our larger buckets. Our general fund has the largest set of resources coming to it. But there are also quite a number of other resources that come into the various funds and firefighters, land purchase revolving, equipment rental, human services, operating, restricted, and general CIP. Very quickly, just to remind you that total for the revenue is about 1.775, just above the expenditure of the preliminary budget. As way of reminder, you've seen this graph a few times throughout our deliberations. The tax revenues, which you have the greatest impact and influence over, are currently in a bit of a dip due to the broader economic conditions and giving us a new base to start from. So we are coming out of an economic slowdown and we hope to see growth begin to happen in 25 and 26. But as a result, this has kind of overshadowed some of what has been greater growth in past years and larger investments. So our actual expenditures, as we get into those, are a little bit flatter, but there's a few areas that there has been some growth. As we look at those expenditures, about just under 800 million are in the general fund. About 500 million are in the enterprise funds, both operating and capital. Our general capital and our equipment replacement and rental funds are about 300 million. And then our other funds and debt services make up the remaining about 150 million. The budget this year is organized much more explicitly around the strategic target areas: high performance government, vibrant economy, safe and efficient transportation system, high quality built natural environment, community safety and health, and thriving people and communities. These did evolve this year with your guidance and reflected some new additions, including with the naming of community safety and health. As we look at the expenditures, you're become familiar with this chart as we have pulled out wedges at each of the presentations where we've shown what those relative investments are of the various resources to these strategic target areas, with the largest portion of our city dollars going towards community safety and health, which includes not just traditional public safety issues, but also includes our clean and safe water. So it includes our utilities.
All right. Thank you, John. So as City Manager Carlson mentioned, as well as John, I will be walking through the major themes that were part of the process, either via emailed correspondence or questions from the dais that we've cataloged in the memory bank that we've kept updated and available for you all as well as the public. I do want to thank the dozens of staff who have contributed to the 119 questions, of which all but one has been answered for you, and that latest one should be arriving in your inbox before the end of the week. So I do want to just take a moment to acknowledge all the good staff work to provide answers to a lot of your really good questions. So that being said, high performance government is one of the largest SDAs, and a lot of the conversation you all had about is how do we more strategically invest in our long-term growth and capital investment needs that were top of mind as part of the comprehensive update that was running concurrently with our process. There was also a lot of good conversation and questions about how the city can leverage innovation and artificial intelligence while still combining digital equity as a concern within our city businesses and services to the public. Obviously, with a change in the format of the budget, transparency, budget format, resources, and revenues, clarifying that for you all as well as the public was paramount this time around. And we do want to maintain greater access to city facilities. City Hall was mentioned extensively, but also in other STAs, we've mentioned greater access and greater hours to the city's recreation centers, at community centers, those types of things, as well as highlighting our great regional partnerships with other jurisdictions, as well as our legislative priorities. We've also talked about the Vibrant Economy STA, which is a relatively small part of the budget, but very impactful. Specifically focused on a lot of small business support and tourism, as that is a sector that's recovering from the pandemic, as well as our efforts to promote more connectivity with CTAC, as well as highlighting the efforts of tourism and Visit Bellevue. And attracting and retaining, importantly, retaining businesses was a big topic of conversation within your questions, and especially that ground level retail, neighborhood retail, and your mom and pop businesses, but also keeping an eye on the future, including major events like the FIFA Men's World Cup in 2026. Safe and efficient transportation system. Vision Zero was highlighted in numerous occasions as a public safety issue. And we've highlighted within the budget conversation, not just in this STA, but others as well, the technology around Vision Zero, the rapid deployment of infrastructure, a number of planning efforts that are happening throughout the city over the next biennium, but also the financing challenges we have long-term to meet the infrastructure needs for this to be a safe and efficient transportation system. We also had good conversation about project management practices to meet those challenges. How can we be creative and innovative in our capital delivery? But also highlighting the fact that it is a City of Bellevue core tenet to focus on maintenance first. So talking about those investments in pothole patching and the 2 new street sweepers that are included in transportation's budget. High quality built and natural environment. This includes affordable housing, and there was a good conversation about streamlining and transparency, especially as it relates to House Bill 5290 and the implementation of those mandates. Affordable housing fee reductions and the projects that have benefited from the new affordable housing fee reduction program initiated last year and the new investments carried forward. You just heard from staff members about ESI investments that are included in the budget, and we are monitoring the impacts of the potential outcome of the election next week on all the initiatives, but especially I-2066. And top of mind again was the comprehensive update. How do we make sure that we meet the challenges of the next 20 years in infrastructure in that built and natural environment while still keeping Bellevue an affordable, accessible place to live? Thriving people and communities. There was a lot of good questions from the dais about the Cross-Cultural Center. What does site analysis look like? what does the programming look like, and specifically what are the needs and the analysis around those assumptions. And within the memory bank, we've had some updated answers for those coming to you tonight. Also, alternatives to human service funding. How do we fill in the gaps that are outpacing the needs? The funding is outpacing the needs that we have, and how do we compensate for the one-time ARPA funding going away? So a robust conversation there, and also how that plugs into the Diversity Action Plan 2.0 and Communities of Color recommendations. And finally, our last SDA is community safety and health. As John mentioned, this is not just public safety, but also utilities as well. So there was a conversation of utilities wholesale costs and the forthcoming capital investments, conversation about the fire levy investments, including an update on Fire Station 10, as well as the next investments in our next 2 firehouses. Public safety supports for large events. Events was a common theme throughout the entire budget process in activating more of our public spaces. But also there was a robust conversation and list of questions about numerous units, including the retaining and attracting police officers, but also the Bellevue Light Rail Unit, CCAT, Water Rescue, Bike Patrol, School Resource Officers, among others. So a robust public safety conversation about how to attract, retain, and also highlighting the good work of all of those units. So with that, I pass it back to John.
Thank you, Evan. As we close up this phase and move towards your discussion, I want to kind of summarize some of the things that we're hearing and that we're listening for tonight. As we started this process, actually at the beginning of the year when you began your retreat and provided us with guidance and discussion around the strategic target areas and your priorities, we've carried that in, and we hope that you've seen and heard some of those things being reflected and is showing that direction even in light of the financial conditions that we have. As we've been listening, what we're trying to understand at this point and make sure that we're hearing the right kinds of interests and shared interests on how to help propose approaches to provide additional or supplemental funding utilizing your council contingency. We've heard that topic brought up in multiple occasions, and there are opportunities that might be before us, and we're trying to listen for some of those things as we go through this discussion. As we think about that, those are, again, those one-time investments that are within that $1 million a year or $2 million in this biennium as we're thinking about some of those things. But what I'd like to do is reflect to you some of the things that we think we've heard as shared interests from a variety of members, more than one in these cases. There have been lots and lots of individual interests that we've heard, but we're trying to find some commonality of those spaces as we go into our last phase of work to help propose some of those final adjustments to get you ready for adoption.
John?
Yes,
Can I ask
Mayor.
you to kind of emphasize that the council contingency are one-time only funds as opposed to a budgeted item that's going to be carry over to the next year?
I will gladly emphasize exactly what you said, Mayor. That is 100% correct. We utilize one-time resources behind that. So those dollars are planned as one-time investments so that we can either deliver short-term specific items or test out new ideas that many of which can become part of a later budget proposal on making it permanent, but it's an opportunity to bring some of those ideas forward or do some short-term one-time things. As I think of some of those shared interests, I think I've heard, and I'm glad to take any correction or any additional as we are listening tonight. We think we've heard about some additional investments in arts, economic development, small business, but really around ideas of activation for spaces and events. There could be something there that I think I've heard from a number of members, ranging from farmers markets through arts pop-ups, through a variety of things that we need to wrestle with that I think I've heard from a number of folks. As we're thinking about, we think we heard some discussion around and some emphasis around, are there ways to advance our multimodal system and our overall mobility priorities, whether it's environmentally related or it's movement of people through a variety of modes. We think we've heard something there, but we're trying to validate that we think that there's a shared interest. We think we've heard advancing ESI goal achievement. I'll offer a little sidebar as we're looking at this, and this question hadn't formally come up, but we can address a piece of this. In 23-24, our investments in ESI across the city were around $19 million. In the preliminary budget that's before you, there are approximately $34 million worth of investments that are they're split between the community and the municipal. There are a variety of spaces. And so this budget reflects an increase in those investments towards bringing in, and the teams have done a great job of drawing in grant resources and different kinds of spaces, all of which is reflected within this. I also think we've heard about investing more in human services. And in fact, the last discussions around the human services seem to be coalescing around some ideas around balancing youth investments plus some additional investments in rental assistance and housing stability. I think I heard a public speaker talk tonight about an and versus an or, and I think we were hearing that as well. I also think we heard more about events here at City Hall, People's House, and are there opportunities to enhance some of the opportunities here? And I think those are the kinds of things that we think we've heard of that are within the scope of one time, try out some different concepts or deliver some new things. I think there are some ways to get there, but we want to hear if we're getting it right or if there were some things that are other shared interests that we need to be taking into account as we go into our final work. And with that, Mayor, I'm glad to turn this back over to you, and we're here to listen and answer as many questions and support you in your deliberations tonight.
Do you have a slide with that email on it?
I do not.
Okay. Did everybody see the email from John today that listed what he just said? I think some people have it printed out. Do you have it printed out for everybody?
Yes, actually, if you may have it printed out. We have extra copies if anyone needs one.
Okay. I think, oh, this is it right here.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, something different.
Okay.
That's good.
All right. So I'm going to start with this. I feel like when I read through the last part, it reflects. I don't think it includes Councilmember Zahn's addition where she was saying with the human services, and I'll let her speak to it. But I just want to acknowledge that I think she had an and in addition to what you listed there that I support. I'll just say that when I look at the vibrant economy and I see only 2% of our budget, I think, boy, are we doing a good job on a low budget. And I feel like the role of government is to do the things that don't happen naturally in a community. And what's not happening naturally in our community is support for small businesses. And so I would like to, not this year, but at the biennium, just as a place saver, to consider how we might increase funding to support our small businesses more and increase that budget permanently. And part of those small businesses would be the farmers markets. I did have a question. Are we seeing more smart starts in our construction than we anticipated? Because you did a projection like 2 or 3 months ago, and we were projecting that with the high interest rates, we were not going to see any starts until interest rates came down. Interest rates came down a little bit. Are we seeing more starts than we anticipated?
I think the answer is not quite yet. We've seen a lot of the smaller permits, but not the larger permits starting to grow.
Okay.
And I think if there's, the week after election week, the Fed is meeting again, and there's a potential another rate decrease coming at that point. There's been discussion for 2 this year, 2 more potentially, both November and December. We'd be excited if it happened.
Yeah.
But a full point drop or 100 basis points reduction in the Fed rate could mean amazing things for large developments that would make the performance start to pencil in a way. And so we're excited, And the information we've been receiving from the variety of advisors and economists are the outcome of the election is actually irrelevant to the Fed rate component.
Right.
So we're kind of excited to say that they're feeling that there might be one, the potential for two, the optimistic ones think two, but we're not quite seeing it yet.
So this, as you said, is a flat budget, and it's kind of a hold tight budget, but maybe things will improve next year, and that the mid-buy we'll maybe have something to talk about. So I'm going to put that at the mid-buy as for something to talk about. So that's the only comments that I have. So how should we go? We start with Councilmember Hamilton and just go down?
Thank you. So I think City Manager, John, you and your team, everyone else at the city who's been involved in this effort, done a really outstanding job. And, you know, we've mentioned it a number of times, so obviously we're constrained in what we want to do, and I think in some cases what we need to do. But with all of that, I think we have a budget that strategically makes some impactful investments. I appreciate the mayor getting some clarification on the council contingency fund. I'm glad that we're going to deploy some or all of that fund, considering how constrained the budget is. And the way I've been thinking about how to deploy those funds is captured here in the email you sent earlier. So I think from my perspective, it's really on track. Looking forward to some upcoming conversations and drilling down a little bit. I do think it's important to remember that we can't do anything if we are not operating from a stable foundation. And I think this budget, like many before, ensures that we maintain our financial stability. And that stability will serve us well as we move into next year and beyond. And then at the mid-buy, when we'll have to find some ways to make the investments that we can't make right now. Certainly more work to do and decisions to be made over the next few weeks before we can take our final vote. But looking forward to getting it all wrapped up and appreciate the process so far. I think you've just done an excellent job, so thank you.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for answering 118 of our questions. I mean, I think that having that clarity is really important because we know that the community needs are more than the available funds that we have. And so we're going to be trying to figure out those tough discussions of trade-offs of all of the things that you summarize for us in our wish list, and understanding that prioritizing is going to be really tough because every one of those impacts people. And so I really appreciate that work that you've done. You know, to me, what I keep thinking about in this budget is it's really about thriving. It's about engagement. And yes, the People's House, I talk about that a lot because, you know, this is like activation and placemaking. And with that said, I also appreciate the amount of money that we're keeping in reserve because I would like to, as we get closer, you know, understand the financial landscape because we hear that King County's underfunded or the revenues are down. At the state level, I was hearing $7-8 billion. So what else might become a gap because it's not going to get funded by the state or the county? So I think always scoping that landscape and understanding just how much reserve is sufficient to account for those unknowns will be important. With that said, I do think with the amount of needs that we have, we should be deploying the council contingency on those one-time pilots and trials. I agree with the mayor, the thriving economy only being 2%. I would love for us to see about doing piloting with some partners on Small Business Saturday with intentionalists. They already have the infrastructure, and so, you know, could we do some piloting where they're helping us with some marketing and some matching to lift up small business for some very small, modest cost? And then, is there more that we could do around mobility, events at City Hall, arts? So I agree with that one. I think the other one for me, though, is the thriving people and community, which is 6%. That's the human services one. I appreciate my colleagues considering that it's the and not the or of how we make sure that we are helping to prioritize that as well. And then lastly, I look forward to the public hearing that's coming up and getting to that point where it's not a lot of money. So how can we take the most advantage of what we have? And are there things we can pilot so that in the mid-buy, we actually have some knowledge to tee up for that conversation at the mid-buy, that maybe we are looking at, here's some additional potential revenue sources we might want to consider, and here's some investments that we're seeing in the pilots that are working to do even more. So anyway, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, very concise. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to even be more concise. Thank you so much. Great job as always. I appreciate all of the effort in creating this comprehensive overview of our budget. I just have one quick question on the email that you sent us. There was a line item on the safe and efficient transportation. What did you mean by advance our multimodal system to update overall mobility priorities? This is really, really high level. Have you heard something narrower than that, or?
Deputy Mayor, we've heard a few different things from you as members. There has been discussion around modal plans and how we get to advancing delivery of some of our projects faster. I've heard some interest in advancing specific types of multimodal projects. And so we're trying to take those pieces and explore deeply what can be done quickly and within the scope of these dollars. So it could be capital, it could be planning, but there's also a whole lot already underway in transportation. And so we're trying to build the capacity components so that we don't trigger them into a place of needing additional staffing. Like it's trying to find the right balance, and we're taking a moment, if we've got the right general kinds of ideas, to go do some exploration in those spaces, if that makes sense.
So the next step is you come with some proposal under that. The same thing for advanced ESI goal achievement. You are coming with some proposal after we say, yes, we heard this investment is our interest. Am I right?
Correct.
Perfect. Mayor, I don't have any further question. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to double dip here because I forgot one thing. In our council contingency, and I would like everybody to consider this, we talked about supporting the farmers market more. They haven't asked for $7,000 additional dollars from us. That seems like an easy thing to give, just a one-time only with the council contingency until we start looking at how we're going to address their needs on an ongoing basis. I would like the council to consider that request.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I think, each one of these are really important. We can't have a vital community without all of these being in action. And it's hard to come and say which ones you think are, your favorite or what you're working on. Obviously, high-performance government, high-quality built natural environments, all those things, safe and efficient transportation, those are all very, very important. What I would like to see in addition, but things that I think are really important that make these things really work more, is three pieces of this. One is the vibrant economy, investing more in arts and small businesses, activation of public spaces and events kind of gets down to this, which I've talked about too, is we need to use this facility more. And then the next is to get to the community safety and health, which is very, very vital, as we've all been talking about in various ways on this. And the health part, I think, is particularly really important. And the last is, and this one is something that I've been working on ever since I've been here, is thriving people and communities and human service needs, youth support, rental assistance, housing stability, provide access to people's house, and this, we'll mention that again, but these are the pieces I think that really are things that are so important that make it even better on things. And they're pieces that sometimes people just put it aside because it's not as direct as, the economy parts of it. I mean, the safe and efficient transportation, that's great and all that. But I think and I really appreciate and I give you kudos for putting these pieces together, because this is a way to really say, this is how we run the city. These are the things that are important. You put all these pieces together, then we're going to have a great city. And the budget is focused on these pieces. So I think it's just an outstanding piece of work, and I think we have the opportunity to really move Bellevue even further than it is now, and it's going places. So I really appreciate the way you've put this together, and this has been a lot of fun reading through this, 70-something pages of all these comments, and it's amazing how you've actually worked through that too. So I'm looking forward to us moving on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. Councilmember Neuenhuis.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I really appreciate the work that's gone into the memory bank, even if you missed one or two of mine, but you got it in there, so thank you. I appreciate that. In large part, really agree with a lot of the strategic target areas and the investments. Definitely agree with the $7,000 for farmers market. That's a very small investment, but it plays a big role in our city, creating community and giving families the ability to eat healthy food. Very important. When it comes down to these interest level, and specifically around the council contingency, I feel like we need to be very specific here. And we shouldn't be, some of these things that I'm reading here feels like it's more aspirational, or it should have been a priority within the budget based on that department or that strategic area. So I hope we're not going to get into these waters of like, we're searching for a project, because that kind of sounds like what we're going to be doing. It's like, okay, we want to advance this, but we're not sure how to advance it. So what can we do? I feel like that conversation should have happened a little bit earlier for some of these. But all for investing in our arts, our small businesses. I think on the activation and events, to be clear there, some of my comments about events was more about making sure that we make it affordable and we encourage different organizations. I know we received an email from the wonderful Young Entrepreneurs event, and how costs quadrupled, and they're not able to afford that, and they might not be able to do that event the next year. I think there was a concern there. Yes, we all want events, but just want to clarify that some of these things might not be necessarily something we put into the council contingency, but it's just a concern on part of the council. Same with the People's House. Absolutely want to make it as accessible as possible. I'm not sure where the line item in terms of a council contingency falls into play there. But great job, I think, overall in terms of capturing some of our interests moving forward. That might be a little bit outside the budget, but again, want to make sure we're being specific. Two things that I want to mention that I still feel, and I'd be interested in what my colleagues think about it, but one of them is the electrical study, third-party independent electrical study, that I feel is vital for us to do as a city, given the targets that we have set, the 70,000 jobs, the 35,000 housing units, the fact that we now are experiencing constant warnings that we cannot accurately, or our ability to really electrify businesses or homes, especially during weather events. In May, the see if I get this right, the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee in the Northwest forecasted that we're going to need 30% more electricity this decade to meet our expected demand. 30%. This is the highest level of growth in 40 years. And while it's great that we're growing, but we need that energy because we're seeing more residential, commercial demand. We're seeing more EV charging. We power a lot of our Vision Zero or transportation through electricity, the public utilities, the data centers, the AI, machine learning, home appliances, electronics. This is all putting a tremendous strain on our grid, and I don't know how we're going to continue to grow and hit these targets if we can't power our city or we severely kneecap our ability to grow.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Could we ask that it be a third-party independent study on energy demand?
I think that's half the equation, is the demand, but also how we're going to, or what we're going to do once we know what that demand is.
Right.
Yeah. And
I don't want to limit it to electricity. I want it to be
yeah,
energy.
that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. That's completely fine, and
Okay.
that's a good comment. I 100% agree with that. And I mean, I'm glad that city staff and PSC are talking and meeting, but I'm not sure we're getting to the crux of this issue, and hence why I really like to see an independent third-party study and a one-time study on this. So that's one
Could
thing.
I ask one clarifying
Yes,
question?
please do.
When the city has done this in the past, it was I'm going to call it almost an oversight review of PSE's work to validate that they're looking at the right things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's what you're asking for here. Or
I
it's
don't
something
think
a
he
little bit
is.
more than that, I think,
Yep,
is what I think I'm hearing.
Yes.
That was a relatively low dollar. If I'm thinking, putting on my old consultant's hat, I think there's ways to get at this without it becoming a very large, overbloated study. But I think that's like, how do we find the right edges of that? If I'm hearing some of that, it would involve a review of PSE's information, but also hone in on opportunities and needs for
Correct.
energy that are probably aligned with our comprehensive plan.
There you go.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I think you have another one you wanted to add on or not?
Yeah, I had one more I wanted to mention.
I'm
as
going to
well.
say something before I forget.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Just before I forget. I think that Councilmember Neuenhouse earlier brought up a good point, which is, I think that when you bring this back to us and you look at where we are asking to spend the council contingency, that it be actual measurable items that we can measure the success of it. It's an actual item, line item, and not just an aspirational goal, like he said.
Mayor, I believe in our hope is that as we're actually going to the departments and bringing up the specific kind of next things in their list that align with these interests.
Okay.
So we're not creating new work. We're just pulling out the right specific threads to be able to articulate those to you. We will be having some individual conversations with members clarifying to make sure that we're getting the right things so that we bring back a list of very specific investments.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you. That's
go
great.
ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And the one other thing that I did bring up previously, but I just want to, again, would love to get the support of my colleagues to, again, make Battalion 102 whole, partly just from a public safety perspective, but also just from a financial perspective, because I know we have in place where we are paying overtime now in order to compensate for not having that battalion fully built out. So that's costing us a lot of money to do that and have that as like a shared responsibility amongst different firefighters in order to fully staff that battalion. I'd rather see us fully fund this now, make that battalion whole, get the leadership that they need, and to better ensure that we always have the capability to look after our residents when incidents do happen, no matter where it is in our city. So I would like to make another plug for that. Again, that we hire those additional FTEs and leadership there to make that battalion whole. So
How
that's what-
about we ask staff to weigh in on whether that should be part of the mid-buy, a permanent, an ongoing
Okay.
budgeted item versus a one-time expense this year?
Yep.
Mayor, there's a twofold issue associated with this. Staff is actively investigating that with fire and human resources, but it is also a mandatory subject of bargaining that is active. And so we suspect, should there be a result of that bargaining that might require additional resources, that could be a portion of a later response, but we also do not want to interfere with that bargaining that is currently underway.
All right, well, thank you for the warning there, because it's not always evident to us. All right, sounds good. We'll take that one off our list, and we'll come back to it after the bargaining is completed.
We also.
Do we know when that might be concluded?
I don't actually know the schedule of that bargaining, but it is underway, and I know it is a subject that is actively within that list, and I'm sure that the city manager can provide you with some additional briefing on that in an appropriate venue.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And Mayor, I'm just going to ask one more thing. Sorry, I'm taking more time than I probably should be allotted, but the Office of Housing. So I just want to poke at this a little bit more, just because I understand that we're going to get a new director who's going to lead this office. Plus, I notice we're also looking at spending $250,000 for a consultant to kind of set this office up. So we're already up at $500,000 to establish this. Can I just get another explanation, and maybe this comes from the city manager's office directly, both the directive and how this Office of Housing is going to function effectively, independently, when we've had such great success working with partners such as Arch to create great affordable housing. I'm just concerned that this office is going to grow and unfortunately suck more and more dollars into the administrative functions of affordable housing, when I'd love to see it being actually creating housing. And so that is my concern. So I don't know if you could.
I'm actually going to start the answer because
Okay.
I was the one who initiated this. And we have a lot of surplus property in the city that we've talked about for years of developing into affordable housing. And so this is in response to that, to bring in some expertise in how we might do that, because it's very different than anything else we've ever done.
Okay.
So now I'm going to let the city manager take over.
Thank you. Very good questions, Councilmember Neuenhuis. I'll start with the Arch, right? So I think Emil, when he was here, responded to how we intend to continue to work very closely with Arch. They're an extremely important partner in how we implement affordable housing, both within Bellevue and across the region. So we don't see that the relationship or necessarily the work that Arch does with us will change, especially immediately, right? We'll need to look at it over time. That's part of what that analysis will help us do. And then in terms of the staffing, so we are proposing to rely on our existing housing staff and utilize an existing position for the individual who might lead this work. So the additional costs are really absorbed for the staffing at this point within our existing budget. So the additional is really the funding that is identified for the consultant work to help us with the organization. And then I would also add that the intent of the Office of Housing really is to allow the city to advance more quickly on some of the housing projects that we are looking at with our own properties, to help us advance some of the faith-based organization properties, other public properties, and really provide a little bit of an accelerant, so to speak, for affordable housing properties and projects within the city. Things that Arch will be participating in, but by having our own staff focus on that and have some accountability to that, we believe we'll be able to advance them more quickly.
Arch was an example. I guess what I'm trying to get at is it seems to be a bit of a departure of how we've worked previously, where we work with a partner or a vendor that has a track record of delivering affordable housing or whatever service. This, to me, would be tantamount to saying, we're going to do human services now. We're going to bring that all in-house, and we're going to start doing it ourselves because we feel we can be more effective or an expedient, et cetera. So this is what I'm kind of getting to. It feels like a bit of a shift.
Okay, so let me clarify that.
Okay.
We are not proposing to be the developers. We would still be working with nonprofit developers
Okay.
To do the construction. This is really the in-house work that's necessary to get some of our properties ready to put out for RFP and to make sure that we are advancing those projects.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, and Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. I have a question not relating to my interest, relating to what Councilmember Newlands just brought up on this Office of Housing. So let me, if I may, I would like to ask some questions about this. Arch, you are using as a comparison. Arch is a regional program. This Harvest Housing is for just Bellevue, right? Managing our own Bellevue properties, right? And Bellevue really don't have lots of properties. You're talking about properties available in Bellevue, such as churches and other properties, right? So we are only going to be, I'm guessing, I mean, I'm not an expert in this. They're gathering, they are collecting, they are making properties that's available in the city of Bellevue. And then they will go through the normal fashion of finding private partners to develop them. Okay. So couldn't this be done by Arch anyway?
It is
So-
done by Arch,
Yeah.
Councilmember Lee. And typically, when we have projects that are associated within the city, we provide staffing to Arch to do that. So in this case, we are proposing that the staffing stays here, focuses on the city projects, works with Arch, but we're staffing them within the city of Bellevue rather than at Arch.
Well,
Can you explain how many
Yeah.
surplus properties we have that we're talking about? It's not just church properties that we're talking about. We actually have city-owned surplus properties that we are talking about.
Yes, right now, we're looking at 3 properties that the city has. We have the potential of 5 kind of on our list, and there may be more in the future, in addition to the faith-based properties that are out there.
This is a big surprise to me. I thought city doesn't own that many city properties. And the property we own, we already have very important dedicated use for them. And so I would really like to know, before we say we have lots of properties, what are they? I'm not going to ask you to do it now. And also, you're not asking Arch to do it because we are providing Arch with the city people anyway, staff. So we still can do that without having an Office of Housing. So why can't we do that? Why do we have to have a special office in order to provide the same staff to Arch? We can operate the same way, same fashion, without creating a new office, a new director.
We are proposing the Office of Housing to focus on the city properties to advance them more quickly. That's the intent. City properties and the faith-based and other properties. So we believe that we will get more quickly the affordable housing projects out if we utilize our staff and focus them on that work, in addition to working with Arch.
Yeah, but can we still do that? We can utilize our own staff and make sure that they work faster, they work more efficiently. We may be able to structure the workload, but we don't think that we need to have, I mean, are they special people, a little bit more Superman, or what do we feed them?
Their
Just
existing
kidding.
staff.
So why don't we, again, I'm a little bit wondering what's the difference that would make them more efficient or make it work faster. So I would like to reserve my judgment because of the question raised before I say, well, this is.
Why don't we
absolutely
get you more
justified.
information?
Sorry?
We
Yeah,
don't have to
please,
make a decision
please.
tonight.
But
This
that's
is,
nothing to do with what I'm
let's make
asking.
sure Councilmember Lee gets
Thank
more
you.
information
Thank
on
you.
that and why we're suggesting to budget a new Office of Housing as opposed to using existing staff or just ours to do that kind of work for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for clarifying that.
Okay. this
Okay,
has been-
I have a long
Oh,
list.
damn.
I appreciate, John and Evans, you went through, did a lot of work. You have actually 119 items. And I have gone through the 119 a few times because I realized what I find out that you have, one of your criteria of putting those on, that made your list is that they have shared interests. They have multiple occasion that's been brought up by, council members or by community. And so I went through just to make sure my items have been brought up, or just by myself, or maybe by other people. Because I had the impression that there are other council members, and maybe as other people as well in the community that have mentioned it. So I went through each list and I make sure that they, are relevant. So I like to just make note of a few of them, see, if anyone on the council, because I think I didn't have the impression that we're supposed to bring it up as we hear the issue being discussed, so that, it's not going to be missed otherwise. I just said, well, if somebody brought it up, hey, it's okay, it's on there on the list. We can talk about it when the time comes, whether I support it or not supporting it. So as a result, I wasn't concerned. But now I found out it is. I feel that this is the time, unfortunately, to discuss it. So I like to mention a few of them to see if there's common interest on the council now that will say yea or no. If it's nay, well, that's the way it is. If it's a yes, maybe still have a chance. One is that I believe that police use of technology is important because we talk about body camera, we already had that. We talk about drone camera, we have some of that. But there are other technology I think police can use because we believe public safety is so important. It's part of the high-performance government, right? Keeping public safe. That's the role of the government, and the government can perform we just heard what public think about having public safety important. So I believe that there are other things we can look at that can make the policing much more efficient, effective, and much safer. So I would like to see if that might catch anybody's attention. That's one. The other one is, Councilmember General has already mentioned it. I believe fire station, he mentioned about.
Hold on, just stop right there.
I'm going to stop that because.
We're not going to talk about the fire station, okay?
I don't know.
No, Conrad, we're not going to talk about the fire station. We've just been informed that it's under bargaining right now, and we're not allowed to discuss
Nothing about
it.
fire department.
Well, not about what Councilmember Newenhouse brought
He
up.
brought up the battalion.
Yeah, battalion.
I'm not going to talk about battalion. I'm going to talk about the fire.
Fire Station 10?
Station 10,
Okay.
yeah. We're not finishing it. So I would like to see that finished.
Councilmember, Fire Station 10 is slated for completion in 2025, and the only little delay that we've had was a little bit of a steel delay, and it is in the budget for completion.
Okay, thank
No,
you.
because Councilmember Lee, you're bringing up things that are already in the budget. And so I wonder if you want to take time to read the budget through and see if the things you care about are in the budget. Because we've taken the time to read the budget. It's pretty big. It took me like a week to read the whole thing. But that's what we do to understand
Allow
what's
me,
being
there's certain
budgeted.
things I'm going to mention that's not in the budget. Okay, if it is, just say it's in the budget. Okay? The other one is, you mentioned about safe and efficient transportation. I suggested autonomous, connected, electric, and shared vehicle. You know, somebody mentioned it's part of the smart city program, but I don't know whether it's specifically included in the
It is.
budget. Is it? It is, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass it now. Okay, the other one is, I got a long list. I believe that you mentioned already youth housing rentals. I agree with that. And I believe that specifically families should be included, youth and family rental housing. Is family included or just youth?
Yeah, it was asked for rental assistance for families with youth.
Okay, is it Light Spring specifically?
No,
No.
Is it in general?
it's in general.
Okay, let's stay with that. The other one is, I believe that the economic development, you mentioned it's important. You talk about emphasizing small business and all that. And I be in tourism, that's included in what you're talking about. I happen to differ. I think tourism is not really a very good economic development for the city, benefiting a city's.
I'm going to disagree with that assessment.
Well, we all can disagree.
That's right.
That's my opinion, okay? Because they come when the economy is good, which we don't need economy like development. Economy is bad, they're not going to come. They're going to show up. And when they come, they're competing with us, enjoying the quality, the amenity that we enjoy. That's important. It's good, but it's not the key. Most cities that depend on environment, tourism,
Yes.
they have a tough time. Anyway, I would encourage retention and recruitment. That's important. And I will suggest, as I've mentioned before, we should make the economic development its own department. And we created an office of housing. It's so important. And we all believe, I hope everybody believes, economic development being very important. And if it's important, we don't even have its own department. And the things they do are not looking at the things that can really attract people to come to this city and remain here, keeping its student here, keeping its talent that come here to stay here. So I believe that we need to put emphasis and focus on that. And I would propose making the economic development its own department.
Okay,
Anybody
I think
agree?
that's a decision, I think that's a conversation for the mid-by.
Anybody agree? No
I
one?
wonder if, city manager, if you might spend some time with Councilmember Lee and go over these questions and define which ones are already in the budget for him and which ones we could discuss at our next meeting and which ones we'll discuss at the mid-by. I think that would be really helpful.
Mayor, yes, we can do that. I would invite Mr. Risha to join me and meet with Councilmember Lee to cover what's in the budget in terms of what he's got on his questions. Yes, and what might be an ongoing cost that would be suitable for discussion at the mid-by.
Okay.
Just being open and fair to me, these are not first time I brought up. These have been brought up before at council meeting and with staffs. But somehow it just fell on deaf ear. So I'm going to continue to talk about it until I hear some response officially. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lee, I'm going to stop you there and let you continue with our city manager
No, I have one more.
John Risha.
I have one more. Okay?
All right.
We talk about high-performance government. We talk about how to make the employment more effective, high-performance government, right? I would like to help city council members. We are part of the city. You know, we are an important player, team player of the city. So I'd like to see us given more support, more resources to be more effective, to make the city a more high-performance city. Okay? I made a proposal in my memory bank to you. Okay?
Okay, we've heard you. So
You heard me. Any council members chime in? No one?
I don't think anybody else has supported that in the past, and I don't know if they
That's
do.
not true. I think, because this came up during the retreat too, about council member travel and other resources. I think that's what Councilmember Lee is referring to.
No, he's actually asking for a budget item for staff that each council member have. I think, was it $200,000 each for increased staff support? It's not just travel.
Just this proposal. It has to be a discussion. We're not, everything that's on the map is not the way it is.
Let's
That's
just do
what
some
it
head
is.
nods and see if this is a council of interest to the council. So everybody who's interested in discussing a $200,000 more
No,
for each
let's-
council
let's-
member
let's-
in the budget.
I'm gonna revise that. Okay? Don't-
Okay.
Okay? I'm gonna revise that.
Okay,
I'm asking for resource, financial resource, to enable city council members to be more effective, more efficient, to do their job better. Okay? I have no specific numbers, because it depends on what money we got. We have to work in real estate. I'm not the one that's
okay.
asked before.
We've heard your
Let me say
request.
one more.
No,
You
listen,
haven't heard what I have to
no,
say.
stop it.
Why?
I'm going to ask you to stop for a minute so that we can see if there's any interest in pursuing this conversation, okay? So
Okay.
can I have some head nods if people are interested in pursuing Councilmember Lee's request? There's one. How about you? No, I am not. How about you?
I'm not for this budget, but I'm overall interested to see if there is any future proposal for a retreat or further to discuss this further, not
Okay.
for this budget.
Okay, how about you, Councilmember Zahn?
I agree. I think this came up in our retreat the last couple of times, and it deserves time for us to have this conversation about how we can be the most effective council together and what that might look like with the city manager,
So bring it back at retreat.
as long as it's as early as possible, so it doesn't
Well,
continue
we're
to
having a
linger.
January, or a 2025 retreat. It's up to you. I mean, I'm asking your opinion, so
Well,
tell me.
You know, my
If you want to
sense-
discuss it now, or have it brought back to us, we can do that, or we can move it to the mid-buy, we can move it to the retreat.
I would be okay with it being at the retreat as long as it is in that January 1. And I also would say that I have heard Councilmember Lee talk about lifting up economic development. We're lifting up Office of Housing. I think that it warrants more discussion, just like, environmental stewardship and whether we have a separate, commission for that.
So you want to
So-
have it in this budget discussion, is what you're just saying now.
No, I'm saying that when we have the retreat, there's
Okay.
a number of these, I'm going to say pent-up parking lot items that really need attention, even if it means we have to spend a little more time together at the retreat.
Okay? Councilmember Hamilton.
I'm with the deputy mayor. I think this is certainly an important topic, but I just feel like tonight this is a very difficult conversation, and I think where we are in the budget process, very difficult to include this. But I do think it's important. I appreciate Councilmember Lee staying on this, and would just second the deputy mayor's approach on this.
Okay, so I don't think we're going to talk about it tonight, Conrad, Councilmember Lee, but it looks like something we can bring up at the next retreat.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay.
Can I make a comment, please?
Yes.
Yeah, due respect, to what's going on. I hope you understand that. very appreciate, when council member, including the mayor, deputy mayor, everybody, when we discuss, let's make our conversation complete. So when you say, you cannot talk anymore, explain why, and then so that in a way that I will respectfully listen. And I do, but it's not, it would be very hurtful and to me, disrespect me by using the gavel and just ban on me. But that is not good for anybody's
It's not
feeling and relationship.
it's not pleasant for me either. So I appreciate
That's right. So
that
don't do
you
it if
are
it's
willing
not
to
right.
listen to me
Please.
when I'm talking. I appreciate that.
That's good.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay?
All right, so our next meeting is not until November 12th, so the November 5th meeting is canceled because it's election night. We didn't think anybody would be focusing on the meeting, so we will resume our meeting on the 12th, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.